Exposing the secrets to success in every episode with Business of Life. Hosted by the unstoppable Jordan Kensington, Business of Life is your weekly dose of inspiration and motivation. Every episode dives deep into the minds of entrepreneurs and iconic personalities from all walks of life, revealing the stories and strategies behind their success. Whether you're a seasoned business owner or just starting out, you'll find valuable insights and actionable advice to help you thrive. Tune in every week for powerful interviews, game-changing ideas, and the motivation you need to conquer your goals. Don't just dream big, live big. Subscribe now and get ready to transform your business and your life with Business of Life.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Business of Life podcast. This show is all about, inspiring entrepreneurs, iconic legends, presidents of countries, and people that are actually adding as much energy, philosophy, inspiration, motivation, everything to the world. And the person we got joining today is one of the best in the world when it comes to the business of life. Forget about entrepreneurship. When it comes to the business of life, this guy has had challenges and has had successes. Literally, there is no competition. Ladies and gentlemen, inspirational serial entrepreneur, leader of the Shark Tank. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mark Cuban to the show. Mark, how you doing? You all right?
I'm doing great, Jordan. Thanks for having me on, my guy.
It's great to have you. It's great to have you. Now, this is the Business of Life podcast. We talk about entrepreneurs, but we actually go from the very start, because there's millions of young people that watch this show afterwards, and they are like, they're thinking, how did he do it? How did he make it? How did he get to where he got to? And it's always good to start with the past, go into the present, and talk about the future. So the first thing I'd say, Mark, you were born on the 31st of July, and we've got that in common because I was born on the 1st of July. So we are both July buddies here, so we know what July is about. It's the best month. It's the best month, hands down. And your wonderful mom, Shirley Feldman, and Dad Norton, obviously we're very influential in your upbringing. And I remember your brother Brian famously saying, that your mum was basically someone who set her own path. She never followed the crowd. She set her own path. Now, I wonder whether this had any kind of lingering inspiration on you on how you are today in life. How's your upbringing?
I mean, that's another way for my brother Brian to say my mom was crazy. She definitely did her own thing. It was a different day back then. My mom was 20 when I was born. I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, part of town called Squirrel Hill, about 3 blocks from where Wiz Khalifa was born, to give you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, neither one of my parents went to college. My mom had just kind of graduated high school, basically. And here I come along, and so they, my parents were just trying to figure it out as it went along. And, my mom, I remember vividly, and it's funny because I hadn't really talked about this before. And I remember my mom reading to me and my asking her, like kids are, why is it like that? Why? And she goes, it's okay. You can always ask why. You're going to drive me crazy, but asking why is always a good thing. And I think that really got me started to being curious and being successful in life. I think half the battle is just being curious and wanting to learn. And I think my mom was really inspirational in getting me excited to read, to learn, to watch whatever I needed to go out there and, explore, even if sometimes it didn't make sense. I was always that curious kid that got in trouble, for just trying and doing things that other kids didn't do. And I think my mom really had a big part of that.
I love that because I've got 2 kids now. I've got my son Jordan Jr. He's 4 years old, and he just reminds me of Jordan. Literally, he's got questions for days. Dad, why does this happen? How does this? And literally, I'm answering. You spend your whole day answering questions, but I love it because it's that age, is that innocence of wanting to learn, and you're literally programming your child with the tools they will need to become successful human beings in the future. That's amazing.
Yeah, because the world's always changing, right? And some people just go along with it. You just go with the flow. You show up, you do your thing, you collect a check if you can, You go out and have something to drink, you come home, you do it again the next day. Maybe you get married, maybe you do this. But when you're curious, it's just so many, you go down rabbit holes, but you also walk through doors. And when you're walking through doors, anything is possible. I forget who told it to me, but it's been said many times, and I tell it to my kid, right? When you don't read, you live one life. When you read and you explore, you live an unlimited number of lives, because you're exposed to all these different things and all these different concepts and worlds and things that might inspire you, because you never know what that one thing is that's going to click to get you going.
That's so true. And now, Mark, you met and married your wife, Tiffany, when you were 39 years old. By this time, I should say you were raking it in. In the UK, we say raking it in, meaning that the mills.
They say it here too. No, they say raking it in here too. So I hear you.
Yeah, so, okay, sure. That's some cultural references there. So you were raking it at this point. Now, obviously, marrying a lot of people, when you at that stage, you're thinking, is it love at first sight, or is it? How do you know?
Was it the checkbook? Yeah. No, trust me, I know the difference between a gold digger. You can tell gold diggers. Gold diggers. The first thing I always say is, "Oh, hi, you're cute. I really like you." I didn't know who you were until somebody told me. I love to travel, and I want to start my own foundation so I can give back. It's always bam, 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 the exact same things. And when I met Tiff, actually, I met her at the gym. I was playing basketball, and one of the guys I hoop with all the time, he was dating her sister, and that's how we met. So we had just started broadcast.com. So I haven't clicked. I had some money, but I hadn't hit it big, right? I hadn't really raked it in yet. We hadn't gone public or anything like that. But by the time I got married, I had. But yeah, and so you can tell.
And you can tell. I mean, obviously, she's there. She's there now. She's been there for ages.
Now I know for sure. Yeah.
Of course. Now, your early days, you sold garbage bags and you did bar attending. Now, you did a lot of menial tasks to get there. And, I kind of myself, I mean, before I made millions, before I got into the business and all of that, 28 years, 30 years ago, my whole thing was starting from the bottom. Did everything from cleaning to did everything you can. I know how it made me feel today. It makes me so humble and unmaterialistic.
There's
right?
No
of course,
way
you got the house and everything.
There's no way you're humble. Don't give me that shit.
No, I am. No, honestly. No, 100%.
I already know better.
100%. No, I mean there are moments, there are key moments, but literally, I find. I mean, I don't know. I find when you come from humble beginnings, a lot of material things mean nothing to you because of that. I bet you have a drive. The drive's there, right? And that drive is that.
It's fear because you've been there before and you don't want to go back.
But see, I thought it was fear, but I kind of take the word fear out and I say, is it fear or is it like I know, right? Because when like for example, if I put you, Mark, in any country now with no money at all, you can make it from there. You have a drive and a hunger. That's not just
I've got
normal.
Experience though, right? Because when I was just I remember, so I got fired from a job and I started my own business and Micro Solutions. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm in business 1 month. I'm in business 4 months, 6 months. I got $20,000. I got $50,000. And I would say these things to myself because it was almost surprising to me. I knew I was good, but I also knew it was hard to stay in business. It was hard to I had 5 roommates. I was sleeping on the floor when all this was going on. And so it wasn't like I took it for granted. I literally was scared, and that kept me motivated. But I get your point that you do get to a point at some level where you've done it enough times that even if they put you on another planet, you could do it again.
100%. Now, your first company was Micro Solutions, and there was a lady called Renee Hardy. Don't worry, Mark. She's not here today. Today. Don't worry. She's not on the show. Don't worry. But Renee Hardy, I mean, as a startup, what did Renee do for people that don't know the story, to either inspire you or to actually shake you up?
Which taught me a lot. So the story is, at Micro Solutions, we had been in business, not all that long, maybe 2 years. and we had $84,000 in the bank. And there were maybe 4 people in the company. And one of the jobs was receptionist. And part of her job was to take the accounts payable checks that were going to be sent to our vendors, put it in an envelope, take it to the post office, drop it off, come back to the office. Simple. So we get a call and it's the guy from a bank. And he goes, "Sir," he got this Texas accent. "I had somebody drive through the bank drive-through, and she had these checks where the payee was whited out, and she had put in her name and written her name in."
Oh.
I'm like, "You didn't cash them, did we?" He was like, "Yes, sir. We're a bank. That's what we do." Renee Hardy literally stole 82 of the $84,000 we had in the bank. And, your first reaction, I was pissed, like you would be. I was pissed at the bank for cashing him. I was pissed at her. I was like, what the fuck is going on? But then it was like, oh shit. I mean, like, my company's at stake here. We got to get back to work. And so we started calling all of our vendors, explain what happened, just were honest with them and just worked through the $82,000 we had to replace. And we got through it, but it really taught me a lesson that shit's going to happen. Things are going to fuck up one way or another at some point in your business life. And you can either get really mad and let that drag you down, or you could just say, shit happens. We got to deal with it and we got to move forward. And so that's what we did. And, that's kind of been my attitude, where I don't care what kind of business you have. There's going to be a competitor. There's going to be a customer. There's going to be an employee that just makes life miserable at some level. And you're going to have to deal with it. And, I was 25 years old, I think, when that happened. And so it was a maturing event, to say the least. And so, and you grow from there. And, we grew that company to 80 employees, 36 million in sales, and we sold it to H&R Block, the tax company.
Wow. And where's Renee today? Where is Renee today?
I always use her name, and I feel so bad because it turns out, just how there's another Jordan Kensington somewhere, right? There's even other Mark Cubans. And so now there's a bunch of Renee Hardys like on LinkedIn, and I get these emails after I speak saying, "I found Renee Hardy." I'm like, that Renee Hardy you found is 30 years old. This
She's
happened.
probably changed her name.
Oh, for sure.
So look, Mark, the first time I came across you was in 1998. I was in the UK. I started my first company, which was Invincible Radio, Television, and Magazine. It was the first streaming radio and TV platform in the UK, right? And honestly, when we started, everyone thought we were mad. It was at a time where streaming wasn't that big a deal. Nobody cared about streaming. It was literally, nobody knew how to, and we kind of figured it out. And I remember us being an audio net, right? Because it was like,
broadcast.com,
yes, you guys were reaching. So we had listeners. There's a guy, I hope you won't mind me mentioning his name, a guy called DJ Shane from New York, who's kind of remixed all the big stars, etc. He used to tune into a show from New York to London, and I'm like, how do you know about us? And it was through AudioNet. So it was literally like, man. And I think I've got emails maybe from you from those years, from back in the day, from 98. It's crazy. I'm not sure.
What was your email back then?
My email was probably jordan@invincibleradio.com or invinciblemag.com. I don't use that anymore because we sold the company for like 30 million. But you sold yours for a record 5.7 billion.
And who was the biggest back then when you were doing your thing? Who dominated back then?
Well, in the UK, like no one was doing it. You dominated in terms of streaming, because literally nobody was doing it. Like literally, nobody was doing it because we were looking for a partner. I think AudioNet also did something called encoding. You encoded. There was something about encoding where if you had an MP3, it will encode it. We
hosted it, we streamed it.
I'm telling you, I remember all, because it made our stream, because it was buffering then. Things would buffer.
So when it was hard back then. It was hard to do.
It was hard. It was on.
It's not like
That's
this
crazy.
Netflix or YouTube now where you just click and there it is, right? Back then, there wasn't enough bandwidth. It was tiny for video. It would buffer. But, it was the only way. Like if I wanted, like who do we have from the UK? We had some DJs from the UK and we had some nightclubs. We literally would stream the audio from nightclubs so that people could listen. And it'd be in the morning. It would be live and stuff too. So it was like the morning over here. It was insane. But yeah, you could just hear anything from anywhere in the world by going to audionet.com and then broadcast.
That's incredible. And you sold that company, and this is one of the first multi-streaming companies. You sold that to Yahoo for 5.7 billion. Now, that was in stocks. Obviously, I think Yahoo missed the bucket on this one because I think
they screwed up big time. Yeah, they screwed up big time.
I mean, Yahoo were bigger than Google at that point.
Oh yeah. Yahoo tried to buy Google. Yahoo they were good people. They were really, really nice. They were, they knew their stuff technically, but they just didn't have a feel for marketing and sales. And anyway, when the internet stock market bubble burst, they cut way back because they brought in a new CEO. They brought in a new board of directors, cut all this stuff back. Where if they would have done their thing and kept us growing, there'd be no YouTube. We were everything. I mean, literally, when we sold to Yahoo in 2000, YouTube didn't even start till 2006. And so, yes. I mean, if we would have kept on going with them, it'd be a whole different world out there.
But you're not regretting because
hell no! When I
you're not regretting that.
I'm not regretting shit.
No, you're not regretting that. we got cash. We got 30 million in cash, not stocks. But you got stocks. Now, was that scary? Because obviously, the stock market collapsed. What would you have done with all the stocks that you had? So what did you do? Yeah, it would have got it straight away. I mean, instantly. What did you do to make sure those stocks ended up becoming profitable?
I did something called a hedge, using something called a collar. So what a hedge is to protect yourself from the downside. What a collar is, I went to my stockbroker at Goldman Sachs and I said, look, my share of it was like $1.9 billion before taxes. I'm like, this is more money than I ever dreamed I could ever possibly have. I mean, all I care about is keeping it. I don't need more. Like, just don't screw it up. And so we did this thing called a collar where we sold calls against it, which means I sold the right for somebody else to buy it from me at some point in the future, so that if I was wrong and the stock went up $500 or whatever, somebody else would have made a lot of money off of it by buying it from me. And then I took the money I got from selling those calls and I bought what are called puts. Those puts allowed me to protect my downside. What it said was, whoever I bought these puts from, they have the right I have the right to sell them my stock no matter what the price is. So if it was, picking a number, $300, I bought the puts for the right to sell at $300. If the stock was $10, they still had to buy it from me. And so that's what I did. I sold the calls, bought the puts, the stock crashed. I was able to sell it and get the cash out. Boom.
Oh, it's smart thinking.
So I was raking it in from the stock market.
Smart thinking. You were raking it in from the start. You could see where the rake was and you raked it in.
Yeah, I just didn't want to be greedy. There was I had a B next to my name. I mean, my God. And there are other people during that same time. It was like, no, I need more and more and more. I'm like, how much fucking money do you need? It's just like, let's go.
I love that. Now, I was speaking to your, I wouldn't call him your arch nemesis, because I think I'm out of Twitter. You guys must be friends. I was speaking to Elon's dad on this podcast actually 2 weeks ago, Elon Musk, and he was telling me, because obviously Elon doesn't want to admit it, right? When I meet him, he doesn't want to ever admit that. His dad was very inspirational, because his dad is smart. I'm telling you, Mark. And his dad was basically a multimillionaire at 25, right?
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yes, exactly. Elon doesn't talk about his dad, but his dad was, when I asked his dad, Elon said, Errol, and his dad's called Errol. Errol said, Elon just wants to give this kind of image of, I started from nothing and made it better. Like, literally, his dad was a multimillionaire at 25. So Elon's dad told me in the podcast, he said, when he made his first sort of like 100 million or whatever, first thing he did was, I need to get a private jet. And everybody said to him, no, it's going to cost you. It's going to be too much stress. He said, nope, look, I've been working hard. I mean, nobody's worked hard. Sleepless nights. I'm getting a private jet. So when you got to that level, were you on that same mindset? Were you like, we got to get a private jet?
Yes. Yeah, that was the first thing I bought. And literally it was 2000, I guess. And I sent an email to a guy at Gulfstream, and I'm like, I want to try out a G5. And so he set up a test flight. I'm like, of course, I loved it. So I emailed him back. I'm like, what's the price? He goes, $41 million. He goes, and I emailed him back, I'll buy it. And he goes, okay. And he sends me the wiring instructions. And so I have my people wire it. So literally, I bought my jet online via email. And then one day, one of my boys is looking through the Guinness World Book of Records, and he like calls me, like he goes, dude, you're not going to believe it. You are in the Guinness World Book of Records for the largest online purchase ever. And it still stands. But buying a jet was the best thing ever because, you know, like my dad used to drill this into me all the time. It's like the one thing you can never get back is time. The one asset you never own is your own time. And the one thing that can save you time is a jet. I mean, I'm spoiled. That's the one thing that spoils me because I can just like, okay, we're going here, we're going there. You know, how soon can you be ready?
I tell you what, Mark, I tried it once, and I'm not gonna lie to you. The parking fees, the cost of maintenance, it's a headache. How did you learn all of that? Because I had to let it go. I had to let it go. How did you learn? Because you've got to. It's a whole different. It's a looking after 10 kids.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's expensive as hell. I'm not.
It is
for sure. But you know, that's why. Look, I got lucky in a lot of respects, right? And I don't want to look back, you know, and say, well, shit, you know, what was I saving for? You know, my time is my most valuable asset. I could afford the plane. Yeah, it's expensive to maintain, and the gas is expensive, but the time is even more valuable. And that's what I wanted to control more than anything else is that time. So, you know, I see it as a bargain in some respects, but yeah, it's one of the smartest investments I ever made because it just gives me more time with my kids, more time to myself, more time to, you know, get things done. But yeah, I mean, I'm spoiled.
It makes sense. It makes sense. Now you mentioned Lockheed, and you mentioned Lockheed a lot. Do you believe in luck, or you believe that you create your own chances? Because I'm of the belief that yes, luck does play a part, but I think there's a science to it. I believe that because some people say, hey, you know what? If I wasn't born in this family, I probably would have made it. If I wasn't born in it, but when you look at the research of people that have been successful all across the world, it varies. There are people that were born in very poor backgrounds and become successful. People with some rich backgrounds that ended up losing it all. Is it luck, or do you create your own luck? Do you literally have to be like, I have to be a crazy dreamer?
Both. Okay. So you can create your own luck. You can make things happen. You can make good money, but to be a billionaire, you got to be lucky. You know, I could have done the exact same thing, but if the internet stock market hadn't exploded and gone straight up, I'd be wealthy. I'd be doing fine, but I'd be renting a private plane when I needed it as opposed to buying one. You know, so luck impacts the scale of it all, but hard work, effort, brains, all, you know, getting your ass out there and doing the job. That's the part where you create your own luck that allows you to be rich as opposed to wealthy, whatever it is, you know.
No, completely, I agree with you. And the kids today, the young people today are doing this in a way that is unprecedented. You have young kids going on. There's a young boy, Kai Sinat, I mean, he literally is streaming and making more money than people doing, deals left, right, and center.
You saw the memes about the lady from the OnlyFans that made like $40 million and $4 million in a month.
Is that luck? Is that literally
Trust me,
creativity?
it's both. You got to be born
Yes,
hot
it is.
to get your OnlyFans account, right? If you don't got the right look, don't matter what you do on OnlyFans, it ain't gonna work. And Kai's got skill, right? He's talented, but if he would have been born 20 years earlier, he would have been on broadcast.com and there wasn't the money
True.
there. So
True.
he has the skill and he has the entertainment value and he's got the personality and he's done a great job networking to build up his influence. Just like Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, did all this work and put himself in a position to succeed, and he keeps on growing it. If YouTube, depending on the rev share, maybe it's a different world for Jimmy, and what he's able to accomplish. So, when I talk about luck, it's more timing driven and the world you're in at that point in time, because that you have no control over.
Definitely not. I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. Now, in 2000, you purchased the majority stake in the NBA Dallas Mavericks. Now, for us
Wait,
in
you see that
London
thing over
or
there?
the UK,
You see that gold thing back there?
I've seen that. I can see it. I
Yeah,
can
that's
see
my
it.
boy Larry O'Brien.
I love it. I love it. I love it. For us, for the UK, because obviously we don't have the the NBA is kind of coming in the
Yeah,
UK, but
no.
we are more football here, and this is the equivalent to sort of like Man United, Arsenal, right? How first and foremost, what was the thought process behind that? Where did you sit down and think, all right, do you know what? In terms of investment, I'm looking at NBA Dallas Mavericks. This is where I want to go. This is what I want to invest
No,
in.
nothing at all like that. So my two favorite sports in my life are basketball and rugby. And so, I play basketball. I was at the gym this morning and I worked out and then I started getting up shots and playing basketball. I love the game. Rugby, I love to play, but it's not the same over here. And so, basketball was the sport. And so I used to go to the Mavs games and they were awful. And it dawned on me one day after I got paid, I'm like, oh shit, I can do a better job. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. So I went through the process, and in January 2000, I bought the Mavs.
That's amazing. And what was one of your most amazing moments as owner of the Mavs? What something that you look at and you think, do you know what? That was one of the best times ever.
Well, obviously winning the championship was huge. Just being in that moment, where you holding up that trophy, because another thing that takes luck, right? But it's still, it's so hard to do, and it happens so rarely. That was a special moment. The other parts are like
I love
when
that.
there's a game-winning shot, where the ball is going up. It's like scoring a goal, with 2 seconds left in the game. And see, as the owner, I can run onto the court and dogpile with everybody else that just hit the game winner. That was great. Having the parade for the championship. There's just so many great moments.
Love it.
Know all the guys, just becoming part of the Dallas community and, being able to give back. It's just nonstop. Now losing sucks. And you know what it's like for, Arsenal and, the Premier League teams when they're not doing well.
Oh, people take it personal, mate. People take it very. I've seen grown men cry, Mark. I've seen grown men literally.
I've been a grown man crying, but the point being, the whole town hates you, and you can't do anything right. You ruined the squad, right? We were great, and then why didn't you spend the money to get this guy in the transfer or whatever they call it over there, right?
Yeah.
And so, when you're winning, it's great, and when you're losing, you're an asshole.
Now that is true. That's so true. Now in 2003, you and Todd went on a partnership and invested. You actually acquired Landmark Theatres, and that was getting into the film and television world. So Landmark Theatres, what was the mindset behind this? So obviously,
so at the time, I also started. There was a company called HDNet. And we were the very first all high definition TV network in the country and one of the few in the world. And so we had that, and that was growing really fast. And we also were making movies. And so we had a company, 2929 Productions and HDNet Films. And we was like, okay, we have a TV network or a couple TV networks. We were producing movies. And here it is, this, art house movie chain, Landmark, that becomes available. Let's buy it so we can be vertically integrated and control it, because nobody had done that up until that point in time. And so we went for it, and it worked out pretty well for a while. But then the movie business got hard. But I'll tell you, you may not know this, but I greenlit a movie in 2004. And
Was that for Magnolia Pictures? Was that part of Magnolia Pictures?
Magnolia Distributed. I forgot to mention. Yeah, Magnolia Distributed.
Okay.
It was for HDNet Films. And so this guy, Alex Gibney, emails me. He goes, I've got all this video from this company called Enron, who had just had this big scandal. And I'm like, okay, let's, what do you want to do? He wanted to do a documentary. I'm like, let's go. I'll greenlight it. And so in like 22 minutes, I greenlit this documentary. It ended up being called Enron, the Smartest Guys in the Room. You can look it up, but it got nominated for an Academy Award. So my very first movie gets nominated for an Academy Award.
Crazy.
I'm thinking, this stuff is easy. Let's go. So then my partner, Todd Wagner, brings a movie with George Clooney, and it turns into this black and white movie called Good Night and Good Luck, about the McCarthy trials in the United States, which was a big scandal. It gets nominated for 6 Academy Awards. So in less than 2 years, we have 7 Academy Award nominations. We didn't win any of them, but I'm thinking, this stuff is easy.
I could do this.
You never heard of another movie we did after that. Maybe Aquila and the Bee, but other than that, nada.
But why do you think, is it because you just didn't have the good scripts, or why do you think you didn't?
It's hard. Think of all the movies that people have pitched you, right? All the movies that you've seen or heard about or heard stories about. There's like no limit to the number of movies that can be produced, and getting people to get off their butt, get on the tube, go to a movie theater is hard. And we started off great, but then we weren't as good at it as we wanted to be, which led us to selling, Landmark and HDNet. We still have Magnolia though, and we still have 2929 Productions.
No, amazing. Now, in the UK, we have Dragon's Den, and one of our previous award winners, a good fan of our award ceremony, Peter Jones.
My guy, Peter Jones.
Yeah, Peter is amazing. Peter's actually won 2 times at our awards as best reality TV judge. He won in 2011, and I think he won 2 years ago. So yeah, Peter's amazing. Peter, the tallest entrepreneur I know. He should be a basketballer. He's so tall.
Really? I mean, and we actually did a deal together. A company called Collars & Co. Because he came on as a guest in Dallas for Shark Tank. So we did one called Collars & Co., which is killing it.
Now, that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, leads quite nicely to my next question. You received the call to go on Shark Tank. And first and foremost, at this point, I don't think this is an ongoing theme. You are still raking it in. You're raking it in, right? But Shark Tank, it's like Trump going to The Apprentice, right?
No, nothing like that.
The same, but you know the analogy. It's like, I mean, think about it. Back in the day, most entrepreneurs just like to do the hard work. The Jeff Bezos, they want to be behind the scenes doing the hard work, right? There came a time where the Richard Bransons and everybody else were like, we need to be visual. We need to be on TV. If you remember Tom from MySpace, nobody saw him on any interviews. He was just a picture. It was what we call today a meme on his own platform. But Shark Tank made you not just a household name in the US, internationally. I mean, you can go to anywhere in the world and they know Mark Cuban, right? Yep. And then obviously people have been using Mark Cuban things maybe in the past, but now they could put face to a name and they could put a personality on there. And the same as Peter did exactly the same thing in the UK with Dragon's Den. He became loved by many and he broke the stereotypes of entrepreneurs. People always thought entrepreneurs were like, the kind of idea that people have about bosses, right? They always it broke that. And you did the same in America when it came to entrepreneurs. And, watching Shark Tank, I've seen a lot of people come on the show and say, hey, Mark, you made me become an entrepreneur. And first and foremost, how did that call come about? And it's a triple question. Secondly, how did you kind of climatize to all that newfound fame? Because it was kind of now taking yourself from entrepreneurship to celebrity, right? And number three is the triple question: is that you were leaving Shark Tank, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
why did you decide to leave? And so those are three triple
So I
questions in
got the
one about Shark
call
Tank.
in like 2009, and it didn't work out for the first season. Then they decided to bring me in as a guest shark for season two. And literally, it would be on like a Tuesday night one week, a Friday night another week, a Sunday night another week. And I'm like, this show has got no chance whatsoever. But they want me to come on for 3 episodes.
Mhm.
I'm like, it's on ABC, it's on network television. You know, it's going to be seen by millions and millions of people. Go on there, Mark, have some fun. And so I
There you go.
decided I'm going to go on there and just rip it up, right? I'm just going to have fun, just, go for the experience, thinking there's no chance this will ever last another season. So I go and do my 3 episodes, and lo and behold, the ratings start to tick up. And then they're like, "Do you want to come back and be full time?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, I want to come and be full time." And that was, my second season, and that was 15 years ago. So I mean, I've
Wow.
been on there
Wow.
15 years. In terms of dealing with fame of it, it's an adjustment. From being
Mm.
able to go out to a pub with my friends and get stupid to no more. Everybody's watching, everybody's taking pictures, everybody wants to see you, and and do things, and whatever. Um, it was an adjustment, and it took me a little bit of time. I'm not going to say it was easy, and I think just in a social media world, when everybody knows your face and knows you by sight, it's a little bit weird, and so
It
it
is.
took some adjusting, but it's a good problem to have. I can think of a whole lot worse problems that I've had. So that it was an adjustment. And then in terms of why I'm leaving, um, 15 years. It's a fun show. It has nothing to do with the show. I love it. I love what it stands for. Like you mentioned, people come up to me all the time. I'm an entrepreneur because I watch Shark Tank. My son or my daughter started this business because they watched Shark Tank. You guys have taught us about business, et cetera, et cetera. And so I love everything about the show. But at the same time, we shoot in June and we shoot in September. And June's when the kids get out of school. And when they were real little, they didn't know the difference. But now they're 15, 18, 21. They're like, I can't miss that time. They're getting ready to move out of the house,
Yeah,
and
that's
that
true.
time goes by fast. And so it was like, it's time. It had nothing really to do with the show, just really me wanting to spend more time with my family.
Another thing I like you have that sports mentality as well, where you want to leave on a high, right? Because there's no point leaving something when it's all going downhill. You're
No, you
leaving
don't
it. It's
want to be there
positive.
when the shit hits the fan, right? And then all of a sudden you got canceled. No, you don't want to be there for that. And I think the show will go on because the stars of the show are the entrepreneurs, not the
Yeah,
sharks. But at the same time, all of television, all of media, all of streaming is changing very, very quickly. So, I think the show will do fine, but it'll be different.
definitely. Now, one of my favorite episodes of that Shark Tank was one episode where I can't remember the girl's name. This girl walked in and did a pitch, and you said, "Look, I'm investing in you because you will be able to inspire my daughters,
Yeah.
and because I really need because I'm so inspired by your story, and I want my daughters to have a really good role model." Do you remember that? Do you remember that show? Do you remember that episode? And
Yeah, of course. There
is
was a company
she?
called Ruminate. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it was like a toy. And they did a really good job of building up this company to the point where they sold it. And so it was like within 2 years they had sold the company. So it was a great deal for them. It was a great example that they set because it was 3 women entrepreneurs that had put together Ruminate, and it was a great example for my kids. I was glad to be part of it.
That's amazing. What would you say was your favorite investment and one that's still your favorite investment today
Um,
from there
they're
on
like my
Shark Tank?
kids. Yeah, they're like my kids. So I've got to so like Mush, which is like this flavored oatmeal, they're killing it. Dude
Mm,
Wipes, you may have heard of, they're just
mm,
destroying it. Dude Wipes, I gave them maybe 200 grand for 15 or 20% of the company. I don't even remember. And they're doing
mm.
$200 million in sales and just raking it in. Another company called Beatbox Beverages. It's
Mm.
a seltzer alcohol. They'll do $200 million plus in revenue this year. So there's just, twisted up combs. Like You Got a Natural. There's this guy, Noel,
Mm.
who did these
Mm.
combs that look like little tennis rackets. And he took it from nothing to making, millions of dollars in profits for us. There's just so many great stories that I've been part of, and so many great entrepreneurs. Now, there's been some duds, but it's the good ones that carry you through.
They're talking about duds, right? I've got an email sitting in my inbox, and this email was for Uber. This is years ago when they were looking for. I think a lot of people, and I have got this email sitting in my inbox about giving me an opportunity to invest in Uber at the early stages, and I couldn't get it. Like, and a lot of people are in the same
Oh,
situation.
you actually
And
got
when I
one
look at,
too?
say that again.
They sent you an email to invest?
To invest in Uber. This is I still got it on my inbox. I think it was Travis, or I still got it in my inbox. I literally I couldn't understand it, right? And then what happened was, when they actually look, I did invest in it, right? And then when 3 years after they launched, I still didn't get it, right? Because in the UK, they were a little bit late in the UK, right? So they now kind of blown up in the US, but they were late in the UK. And they said to us, and they came to me and said, well, do you know what? We've launched now. Can we sponsor the awards, right? And I said, well, I mean, it's going to cost you this figure. And they said, no, we're not able to do that. But what we can do is offer celebrities this code for them to use, and they will get free taxis. I'm like, this makes no sense. It makes no sense. So I said, you know what? You go ahead and do it. So we partnered with them, and they did this thing. And that was a genius idea. So celebrities with millions of fans were offering free rides via Uber, and they launched the UK through me anyway. Right? Do you have a story like that of a company that you could have
You're just trying
invested
to
in?
rub it in. You're just trying to rub it in because you already know.
You missed that one.
So I'll tell you the story. So I got hooked up with Travis Kalanick, the one of the founders of Uber, and it was before Uber. He had a company called Red Swoosh, which
Right.
did all this digital transfer of files. And I helped him, got involved, invested, and he did a good job. And we built it up and sold it for like $18 million. And so he comes back to me and says, I got this idea called Uber Cab. And I'm going through, I'm like, I like this idea. I got it immediately.
Oh, you actually got it. You got it.
I got it immediately. And I'm like,
wait, Mark, wait, before you go on, you got the idea of strangers going to someone's taxi, someone's
Yeah.
car. No,
Someone's
the way
car.
it was sold to someone's private car.
yeah.
Strangers going to someone's private car. I'm like, security, come on.
I knew it could work. I knew it could work because taxis were a pain in the ass in the United States.
Yeah.
You had to wait, you had to call, you didn't know if they were going to show up. There was no way to determine if it was happening or not. And these guys had an app that were going to give you all the information you needed. And so I was like, okay. And then I went Shark Tank. I started negotiating. Never heard back from them. Never heard back.
Wait, you actually negotiated. What was your offer?
I forget. He was like at $10 million valuation, and I was like, okay, $5 million valuation because you're gonna have to keep raising money. I mean, and how many billions?
Wait,
and billions
you would have made billions. Well, anyway, you did make billions anyway. But that. So would you say that was one of the ones that got away? Would you say honestly that was the one that got away?
The one who got away. I mean, it's not like I'm struggling, but oh my God, it's
Of course.
killed me.
So Mark, in business, the rules are changing every day in business. We were talking at the start of the podcast that when we first started, the internet was seen as being crazy. Literally, I remember a time where if you actually sent someone an email, they looked at you like, what is this? What? Send me a fax. Meet face to face. If you're sending an email, it was kind of like scammy. Like, why are you sending me an email? And the internet wasn't looked at like it was today. There was a fear factor. It was like it was going to take away jobs. What we're going to do? Well, everybody's going to go online. There was even this website I remember called anotherworld.com. I don't know if it exists now. And what they did was they created a virtual world where you could buy land. I thought that was over the top. You could buy stuff on there. And it was just like, this is early days. It was a weird place to be. Then there was the MSN Messenger, which, you know, BBM took and made BlackBerry, you know, made it as their own. Now the internet became success. Obviously, there was the come down in 2000 where it collapsed a little bit. The internet created a lot of millionaires and billionaires, and the internet was the force of good and bad, right? But like anything, but if you kind of compare the fear for when the internet started, it kind of reminds us of what's going on today with AI, right?
Oh yeah.
So
Great
I want to know your
question.
thoughts on that. I want to, what are you feeling about AI?
So even like back in like 98, 99, like people would give you a hard time. You can't buy anything from Amazon because you're putting your credit card where Amazon has your credit card and they're just going to steal money from you. You know, Amazon, Jeff Bezos is going to take all your money on your credit card. And, you know, and like you said, people thought, you know, it would take all kinds of jobs and this and that. And with AI, I've been through it so many times with new technologies are going to take your job. And they ended up creating new opportunities. Creative entrepreneurs, you know, brilliant people go out there and find new uses that we didn't even think of, where all of a sudden they need to hire all these people. And the thing about AI is AI just doesn't inherently know something. It has to be taught. And it can take three pieces and, you know, transform them, to use the right word, you know, all these different things and put them together into sentences, but it really doesn't understand what it's saying. And so it'll come up and it'll hallucinate, and it needs to be taught. Anything that's new, as things change every day, like you know, rules change, entrepreneurship changes, business changes. AI needs to be trained on all those things. So there's always going to be a place for how to use AI, updating AI, training AI, you know, correcting AI. And then, you know, and people who know how to apply it to new things, just like Uber took software and used cars and turned them into a whole new industry. You know, AI is going to have these things called agents that'll go out and do things for you. And so we'll find new ideas and new opportunities that are created by AI. I'm not concerned about the jobs part of it. I think, you know, there will be some displacement. Like if your job is just saying yes, stamp, no, stamp, yes, stamp, you're probably going to need to find a new job. That's going to be replaced by AI. But if you're, you know, if you have to come up with new strategic ways to run a business, I don't care how often you ask ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity, whichever AI, you know, to write you a business plan. The business plan is going to suck until an entrepreneur comes in and adds value to it. And so AI will have an impact, but I don't think from a business perspective and an employment perspective, it's going to be negative. There'll be transitional things, just like when we went from records to CDs to, you know, and DVDs to streaming. There was disruption, and that'll happen with AI, but I think it'll be a net positive. Now, on the Terminator side, who knows, right? That's just going to be.
I mean, the Terminator side is. I think Sam was doing his interview at Opera recently. Sam, who's the creator of ChatGPT, and when they asked him what was the biggest fear he had on AI, he said the fear was AI robots learning how to communicate together and learning how to dominate.
So we don't know what they're saying. Yeah, so we don't know what they're saying. And what
yeah, or they could start their own language. You know what I mean? Start their own armies. Is that something that you're wary of, or you just think?
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
like
you can't live in that bubble.
I went on Gemini or ChatGPT, I forget which one it is, and I said, I want you to create a language for me that only uses emojis, so
That's
that
crazy.
there are no letters. And you know,
Mark, you're giving them ideas. Mark, you're giving them ideas, man.
it was cool, right?
They're gonna learn from you. Mark, let me tell you, you are smart. You are one of the people. So you are the 1%. You're giving them ideas. They know no one would have done that.
I know. Meet my friend Arnold over here, the Terminator. So, you know, and the crazy part is I don't think it's going to be like Terminator looking robots that do these things. I think it's going to have designs that we have no idea what shape or format they're going to look at. And it's like if you think of drones, but don't think of drones like you imagine them now, but the size of a fly, you know, or a drone that's like an ant. that can assemble either just be a one or being a billion of them that assemble together. That shit's scary, right? So,
Yeah.
imagine coming down the
Yeah.
street,
It
they're all
is.
communicating with each other,
It
and they're
is.
small, so they don't need as much power. And, they can form themselves into hands and legs. That shit's scary. That's my next movie.
Yeah.
But, they're still going to need power at some level. And as long as we can control power, and they're still going to, even if they're, it's just, you can go into so many different directions that it's going to be interesting. I think we'll be able to control them. I don't think they'll gain control of us, but you could really create havoc if you wanted to.
That is true.
When the minute we can have a drone that's microscopic or tiny, then the shit gets real.
I just, you know what? Yeah, I'll think on the positive side of things. Well, I think there will be a balance. There will be a balance because obviously the internet has the dark web and the internet has the internet.
Yeah,
so
there's still the dark web right now, right? There's still the dark web where a lot of shitty stuff happens.
well, there you go. But you
Like,
don't
look
have
at
to
the
go
big
there.
stuff, right? There'll be a Jordan avatar, so that you can have 150 different Jordans. They'll all work from a large language model that you trained with all your emails, all your interviews, all your podcasts.
They'll be doing the sales calls.
All the sales calls, right? And so it sounds like you, it looks like you.
Man.
If people are like, if this was the virtual Jordan and the virtual Mark, nobody's going to have any idea.
But don't you miss, like I was thinking about this the other day. I said, don't you miss the natural side? Like I was thinking about, because I like writing, right? So I'm still old school. I do my counts all by hand. Obviously, I give it to my account, but I like writing. I do all my stuff. If I've got ideas, I don't type the ideas. I feel there's something so connected, but with your writing, and it makes you think more clearer. It's connected to your whole system. And I speak to a lot of young people, and some of them just don't even write. They can spend the whole year.
I forget how to write. Like I don't forget how to write, but like you start writing shit, and it's just like, wait, I can't even read that. It's like all over the place. It's going up. It's going down. It's like
and then memory.
Yeah,
and then memory. I used to remember people's numbers. I used to be able to, if you gave me a phone number, I used to be able to recite it. I had so many numbers in my head.
I remember the phone numbers of the kids from when I was little, still to this day. But I don't know my kids' numbers because they're all right in my phone, right? And it's just, Jake, Alyssa.
That's mad. But is that so that goes to my point, right? This technology, right? Because obviously, if not used, some people like myself, I have a balance, right? I have a balance of using tech and using it, and sometimes I'll go 2 weeks and not touch it, right? And I have to have a balance. I have to have a time where I detox from it, just to kind of get that natural side going. I want to use my memory. I want to use my intellect.
That I agree.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'll do puzzles and stuff. I'll do puzzles. I'll read. I try to read a lot as opposed to just watching videos, because it's easy to get caught in the habit of, okay, I'm going to go on YouTube, just look it up, see what's out there and learn, which is fine. But I think I want to see when on videos, particularly on YouTube, they got to be concise and they got to get to the point, or they're entertaining or whatever they are. They've got to have their personality. Whereas a book's a little different. And so I like to read because it expands my vocabulary, reminds me of words and all kinds of stuff like that, or doing puzzles, even if they're like Sudoku, whatever type puzzles. Those are things, because I agree that you want to motivate yourself, and you want to stimulate your brain, exercise your brain, because you don't want to get intellectually lazy. You don't want your brain to get mushy. I like being sharp. I don't want to forget words. Particularly if you get older, right? Because it's like, fuck no, I don't want to be that. I'm num, and not remembering stuff. And so it's like exercising a muscle. I think you got to exercise your brain. You got to exercise your creativity. You've got to, put yourself in positions where you're exposed to different things, so that you have to keep on using those skills. It's so easy to get caught up in letting things, especially like with school now. I mean, if ChatGPT came out when I was in school, Shit.
Mate, I would have killed it. And I was doing a law degree. Man, I literally would have. Can you give me a case reference that can help me with this? And I would have killed it.
Oh yeah.
So I've got a 4-year-old, and I'm going old school with him, right? And this kind of leads quite nicely. He doesn't watch cartoons, and I keep him away from the phone, away from computers. I want him to read more books. I want him to learn how to talk
It's easy when
properly,
they're 4 years
write
old.
properly.
It's easy when they're 4 years
What
old.
happens? What
Wait
happens?
till he gets to be about 8 or 9.
Oh
And they
no!
start throwing, now when they throw a fit, it's just like whatever. At 4 years old, it's just whatever, right? And they're cute. They can be upset and everything and cry. You give them a hug and they're cute.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
they hit, 7, 8, 9,
Oh
and they have
no!
friends, and their friends come over and you're talking to their parents, and
Oh
you just want
no!
that time and just like, okay, go. Oh my God. Now what we would do is we'd say in order to get more screen time, you had to read. If you read
Oh,
this
that's a
book
good
or that
balance.
book,
Good
so that it
balance.
would be balanced, because we knew that there was no way we were going to prevent it, but we had to have some balance. And then when they got to be teenagers, it was like, read, get the hell out of here.
It's our country. You can't do anything at this stage. But the thing is, you've created a structure. I think with kids and parenting, I think it's so important to have a structure. You have to have a structure, because if they don't have a structure, and if they're not inspired by your parents and their structure, they just gonna be confused. Because they're looking at, even though you don't think, they're looking up to every single thing you're doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, just as a parent, look, parenting is hard. I don't care who you are. It doesn't
100%.
matter
100%.
if somebody knows who you are, has no clue who you are. Parenting is parenting, and your kids don't care who you are. Your kids, and the flip side, like when they get older, they'll start using it against you. I saw you say this. I heard you say that. You're lying, Dad. Oh my
100%.
God. Or it's like you might get away with this with everybody else, but that's not going to fly with me. Oh my
Never.
God, I get killed. But
Okay.
and so you do your best to be a parent, knowing that you're not going to get it perfect. But I've got 3 amazing kids, and at least so
Amazing.
far, they're super amazing.
Mm,
Jake, Alyssa, and Alexis, and they're all completely different. And you just do your best. It's just the same
amazing.
thing for every parent. You just do your best.
And do your kids want to go into entrepreneurism? I think they want to go into business. Are they inspired by that?
When they were younger, they definitely were, but now I think,
Mm.
they're at that age where it's not cool to want to be like your parents. And so,
Right.
and I want them to find their own way.
Yeah.
Because, your kids will find out when you have a parent who's famous, and people, they think you only accomplish things because you're a parent, that you can't do it on your own. And, I want them to be able to go in whatever direction they want, prove to themselves and anybody they want that they're more than capable, and let them go out and find their own way. If they want to work with me or for me, great. I'd love to work with my kids all day, every day. But if they want to find their own path, that's great too. And so we're just trying to leave those doors open for them.
No, I love that. I love that. Now, Steve Jobs famously said, everything is remix. And it leads quite nicely to crypto. Is crypto a, would you, I mean, is crypto a remix of money, as it were, or remix of what gold used to be, or remix of what
Yeah, I think
shells
more
used to be,
gold
or
than
remix of
money.
what the promissory note used to be back in the day? Is it just that, or is there something deeper? Because kind of, a country called Kenya years ago came up with I would say the first fintech app, which was called M-Pesa. This was before
I remember
all the
that. Yeah.
fintech. Yeah, so M-Pesa was coming from Kenya, and they did it because the banking system was non-existent there, right? And it was hard to enter the banking world for the whole country. And M-Pesa single-handedly changed banking in the whole country, and everybody in the country was on that. And I think fintech was inspired by that, without giving that credit. When I look at crypto today, when it first started, when Bitcoin first started, everything first started, it was very much advertised as the revolution, and the young people kind of went into that as hard as possible because it felt like we finally got one up, right? And everybody got into it. But then, right, it became complicated, right? And it didn't have the Instagram moment. It didn't have the kind of fame,
Right.
literally.
The gram
And
application,
even,
yeah. They
do you
have
know
the
what I mean?
gram
Even a
application.
few
Yeah.
years ago, when the NFT, there was the whole NFT thing, and people were selling animals and monkey cards and things like that. And literally, I'm not gonna lie, I looked at that and said, "Oh, come on, Mark. What's the value in an animal on a card in a virtual card? And it's perceived value. I get it. I get it. You need it's like
It's like what's
money.
Lionel
It
Messi on a
is
card
like
though?
the early days of a promissory note. The paper has no value, but then
But
everybody gives it
what about
value.
like you guys have sporting cards like Lionel Messi on a card. You
Yeah,
know, it's
yeah.
a piece of
It's
cardboard.
value.
With
It's huge value to it.
if you collect them, you collect them. But in the bigger
Mm,
picture on crypto, it really depends on which crypto and what country you live in. So Bitcoin is like digital gold. Gold
mm,
has always been around, but the value of gold isn't about how much jewelry is bought or sold in gold, right? Or industrial applications. It's because everybody says it's a hedge against inflation. It's a hedge against, money going bad. But I don't agree with that because what are you going to do? Carry around a bar of gold? Here, I got a
yeah.
knife and a bar of gold. Someone sees you with a bar of gold, they're knocking you out and taking your bar of gold, right?
Yes,
And
yeah.
so, it's been around for 5,000 years and worked for 5,000 years as kind of an asset behind money. But, that was before digital anything. And so now you look at Bitcoin, it's a store of value just like gold. It's got a finite number, 21 million that'll ever been made. And really the key to it's a brand. Bitcoin is a brand, just like Pepsi or Coke is a brand, so is Bitcoin. And that, and people realize that if I hold my Bitcoin and as long as people want to buy that brand, as long as people want to buy Bitcoin, I'll have a place to sell it. And if there's more buyers than sellers, the value of Bitcoin goes up. And the cool thing about Bitcoin, because it is like digital gold and a store of value, there's a whole lot of people that don't want to sell it. They want to hold it. And in the United States and in UK and across Western Europe, that's cool. But then if you look at the application of Bitcoin in countries where there's a lot of inflation, Zimbabwe or wherever, right? And there's hyperinflation, would you rather own, some of their currency that you've got to have boxes full of it, or would you rather own Bitcoin? Knowing that you can transfer Bitcoin using your phone as long as you have internet access, and it's going to go up in value by as much as the currency in your country goes up, if not more. And so it's kind of your hedge against hyperinflation. And then part three to that is because it's such a strong global brand and people will take Bitcoin as long as you have a Bitcoin wallet, it makes it really easy to transfer, money that way. It's the
Mm.
cheapest way to say, okay, Jordan, I've got $100 I need to send you. I don't want to do a wire transfer. I don't want to give you a credit card number because there's all kinds of fees. Let's just look to see what the gas fee is, the transfer fee is for Bitcoin, and it might be a nickel, which is a whole lot cheaper. So I'll send you $100 worth of Bitcoin. Cool. It's Cash App is cheap, Venmo is cheap, but
Mm.
there's a reason why they're all getting into Bitcoin and crypto as well, because it's even cheaper for them to send.
But being a savvy entrepreneur as you are, and someone who's invested in so many companies, doesn't it strike you as a bit weird that the founder of Bitcoin, Satoshi, whatever his name is, no disrespect to whoever he is, it's a weird story that nobody knows this guy. He's got his name called Satoshi. But it's just it's already starting not in the most. I mean, if someone came to you on Shark Tank and said, Mark, I'm coming to present a company. I don't know who the owners are, right? But I
Well, I
promise
hear
you
you.
to invest in this
I hear you.
company.
But you know what really it is? Because it's like Colonel Sanders from Kentucky Fried Chicken. There's no real Colonel Sanders. They just made that
Of
shit
course.
up to make it seem. So there's some dude named John Smith living in the UK that, drives a taxi. No, not anymore. Started off driving a taxi and now is worth $20 billion. And he sells just a little bit at a time. And he's just jumping on his plane, flying wherever. And he keeps on building up that Satoshi Nakamoto story. Who knows what the real story is? But
I guess it's Banksy. I think if you say a dude from the UK,
Banksy,
the only
right?
person that comes to mind is Banksy.
Yeah, or the dude who sold the banana that he put up on a wall for $6 million, right?
Crazy.
As long as there's buyers and sellers, I mean, even stocks in the stock market, if they don't pay a dividend, what's it really worth? What can you really do with it? You just have to hope that there's more buyers than sellers and that the price goes up, because you really don't get any, officially you own part of the company, but it doesn't give you any responsibility. It doesn't give you any authority. It doesn't give you any features, or asset. You can only buy it or sell it. That's it. And you just hope it goes up. So, crypto is not a lot different there. And then once you get beyond Bitcoin, Ethereum has got smart contracts and there's other features of other Bitcoin. So there's a lot of applications for blockchain and smart contracts that really do have value and can help people and companies, including money transfer. But to your point earlier, we haven't seen that Instagram moment where grandma, when I say Instagram moment, or when you were talking about it, it's like, if you go back to 2007, when the iPhone was born, there was no Instagram, there was no Snapchat, there weren't all these apps. And then the App Store comes along, and there was no reason for grandma or anybody to have an Apple smartphone until all of a sudden, hey, wait, I can post pictures of my grandkids or see my grandkids' pictures. Sure, I'll download Instagram and figure out how to make it work. We haven't had that I'll download a wallet and figure out how to make it work moment yet for grandma. And that's what's holding crypto back from it just being widespread and everybody using it.
Now, you mentioned XRP. Oh, no, you mentioned Ethereum with the smart contracts. There's obviously XRP, Dodge. Do you think there is a problem with regulation? And honestly, I 4 years ago, we started a bank called Moneys, Moneys, and that bank was servicing the UK and markets like in Africa, 15 countries in Africa. And the reason why we ended up selling it is because the regulatory landscape was crazy, right? In the UK, it's a nightmare. I think Revolut has some issues. They had to move to Ireland in terms of your license. We had to go to Prague, Eastern Europe, to get our license to operate in Europe. And then there was Brexit. And when there was Brexit, we now had to. So it was it's a nightmare. Do you think? Because I feel like that's also one of the things that is causing crypto not to have that moment.
Yeah, that's part of the mess, right? Because in the United States, there's two elements to crypto in terms of regulation. Using tokens to raise money, that's no different than using stocks to raise money, and it should be regulated like stocks. The problem is that when you go to the SEC, the people who regulate it here in the US, none of the forms work for crypto. And so it's impossible just to go through the process. It's not that crypto people don't want to regulate or register the tokens they're selling. It's that it's nearly impossible. There's been like 3 companies that have done it, and they all backed out after getting approved because it just didn't work. Excuse me. So you got that. How do you regulate raising money? And that needs to happen, but it needs to adapt, just like it adapted for oil wells and banks and other things. And then the second part is just general regulation of registration, just to keep all the silly meme coins and everything from, taking money from people. Because meme coins are fun, but it's just musical chairs. Just know it's just a matter before someone just sucks dry whatever's left and the rug is pulled and a lot of people lose money. So, there needs to be regulation. There's actually some smart regulation in Asia, in Japan and South Korea and Singapore and some other spots. But hopefully it gets to the UK and the US, because crypto is not going away no matter what. There's a lot of really smart people coming up with new applications that'll come up with that. Hopefully that grandma, moment, that Instagram moment, and we'll see.
And how much investment would you say you put into crypto, and what ones are you investing in? Let me take some tips.
I mean, I really only own Bitcoin and Ethereum, and that's it. But I own a
Okay,
lot of it. I own a lot of it.
fair enough, fair enough. Just don't lose the computer, Mark.
Well,
Don't lose the
that scares the
USB.
shit out of me too. It's like I got my little Aduba TV right here.
Just
You
don't
know,
lose the. That's the worst thing that could happen.
oh
It's,
my God, it's terrifying, terrifying,
oh
terrifying.
man. So, Mark, why do a lot of billionaires love the medical industry, right? I say this because obviously Bill Gates is left Microsoft and he went into the industry massively. I think maybe he was dealing with a lot of viruses on computers and he thought, I could do that in real life. And then you are now the co-founder of Cost Plus Drugs, which I think is completely different, right? I'm giving it. I checked the website. I don't know whether it's launched in the UK yet, but I checked. The prices of stuff is just mad, right? Compared to what I'll let you talk about Cost Plus Drugs because I'll say this. I remember. I'm not from America, but I remember my auntie went to America for holidays about 15, 20 years ago. And I remember she fell ill and went to hospital. And before she could even open her mouth, no one cared whether it was like, do you have insurance? Do you have this? Do you have that? It's like it's so money based, right? The health system there, they don't care about you. They don't care about your life. It's all about, do you have the money to pay for this? If you don't have the money, you just need to just deal with what you're going. I mean, you just got to go for it, or just become a doctor. So, what is Cost Plus
So
Drugs about?
in the UK, with the NHS, do you guys have to pay for any drugs at all?
Well, I mean, I haven't. I mean, I think generally the NHS. I don't use the NHS, but generally the NHS you have it for free, but it's being changed now. I think it's been privatized. I think the American system is coming to the UK.
Really?
It's not been announced yet. We're going to have an MP soon. I've got a friend as an MP waiting in the lines. I think Dean, when you come on, you will clarify this. He's an MP. He's an ex. He just is a member of Parliament, and he will tell us what the system is in the UK in a minute. But it's the health system in the UK is changing, right? I feel like it's changing, but the health system in America, I just feel like it's
It's a mess.
it's
It's a mess.
crazy.
It's a
It's
mess.
mental.
Yeah, it is
Now,
mental.
so
Right.
tell me your mindset behind this.
So in the United States, like you go to the doctor and the doctor says, Jordan, you need this medication. The next question they ask you is, what pharmacy do you use? And they send the prescription to that pharmacy. They don't know if you can afford it. They don't know about your insurance. They don't know nothing. And then you have to determine if you can afford it at all. What's your deductible? What's your copay? Do you have co-insurance? Does your insurance cover it? And most people aren't really sure about that. Unless you have a really good insurance program, there's a chance you have to pay out of pocket. Well, because of that, nobody really knew what the price of drugs were. Doesn't matter who paid for it, whether it was the patient, the company, the government, nobody knew what the price was. And so my partner and I, Dr. Alex Oshmayansky, we created this website called costplusdrugs.com. And it's a pharmacy basically where you go to costplusdrugs.com and you put in the name of the medication you need to take. It could be a cancer drug like imatinib. It could be an ED drug like tadalafil, which is generic Cialis. But when it comes up, we show you our actual cost. We show you what our cost is. We mark that up 15%. And then you can either choose mail order, and we'll mail it to you for a $5 shipping fee, and then $5 for the pharmacist to check it, or you can pick it up at a local pharmacy. And then there's a fee for the pharmacist to get paid for doing all the work. But still, the price, by doing that, the prices were like a fraction. This drug imatinib, if you just walked into a big pharmacy retail store and don't have insurance, they probably charge you $2,000. With us, it'd be $21. I mean, I had a friend that was looking at paying every 3 months for this drug called droxidopa, like $10,000. And with us, it was
Crazy.
$60. And so it was just because none of the prices were transparent. Nobody knew what was being paid. So we made it transparent. We published all of our prices, put out a price list, and that's changing the whole pharmaceutical side of the healthcare industry. And now we're trying to extend that into other parts of healthcare here because there's no transparency. Nobody knows what anything costs. And I think
True.
in the UK, you guys have these things called tariffs, right? Where it sets the price for the different drugs and all that. But
Yeah.
everybody gets to see what those prices are. Over here, there was no transparency and nobody knew what the pricing was. And so companies took advantage of that. So, you know, when your grandma came here, if she needed a medication, you know, they know that she has no clue what they should be charging. And so they took advantage and they do it every day. And so with Cost Plus Drugs, I mean, we've helped millions of people just
That's
save money,
amazing.
save families, you name it.
That's amazing. Now that must make you the number one enemy for the pharmaceutical industry, because obviously the pharmaceutical industry are like a cartel. You know, I would never, and I say this very straight, I would never want to get into the wrong side. Literally. I mean, those. How do you manage to get them to be okay with you? Because obviously, the pharmaceutical
Well, there's two
industry,
parts. Yeah, there's two
yeah.
parts over there. There's the manufacturers of the drugs who are fine with us, right? Because we buy a bunch of stuff from them, so they don't really have a problem with us. And then there's the insurance companies and these things called pharmacy benefit managers who basically set the prices for people with insurance. They hate us because
Yeah.
before we came along and there was no pricing transparency, they could charge whatever they wanted and nobody really knew what the price was.
Nobody say
And they
anything.
got away with everything. Now they're having to change to match us, and they hate it.
Mm. So I think, as I said, Dean, the MP, will kind of talk to us about this
Yeah, let me know.
system.
Let me know when he comes on because I want to watch and
Yeah,
see how it's changing.
I'm going to bring him on as we go to the end. I want to bring him on so he can talk to you about the system there, because you might need to launch something like that in Europe and the UK as well, because I think it's a concept that works worldwide, because you will be so surprised. Most of the countries I've visited, the most important problem they have is healthcare,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's literally access, and that is something that needs to be revolutionized. It can't be a cartel. It shouldn't be a
No.
cartel.
And like
Yeah.
here in the United States, people look at the UK and the NHS and say, we should switch to do it just like the NHS.
Yeah, but then America is trying to bring their system to the I mean, they're lobbying to bring the American system to the
Who's
UK.
doing the lobbying? Who's trying to push it over there?
Well, Dean, who's the MP, will talk. I'm going to bring. Actually,
Okay.
let me just bring Dean. I'm just going to bring you in now. Now,
Okay.
before I bring Dean, let me just go. Dean. Dean is a member of Parliament who just recently, I think he's been a member of Parliament now for the past about 4 or 5 years. So he's recently just finished his tenure, and he's been a good friend of mine for ages. Dean, welcome to the show. How are you, Dean?
What's
Hi,
up, Dean?
Hi, Mark. Good to see you both.
Good to see you too.
Now,
Excellent.
Dean, you are actually an MP. You've been an MP until this year, I think, right?
Until
Is that
July,
correct?
yeah. Sadly, I lost my seat, but hope to be back one day in Parliament. But yes,
No,
Sorry
you
about
did
that.
well. You did
I'm
well,
loving the
and Dean,
conversation.
now, Dean, alongside with the Prime Minister of the UK, pioneered a lot of things. I've known Dean for years, and he and the Prime Minister, and they've been to the awards several times, and they pioneered so many things. Now, Dean, before I get you, can you talk about the NHS system in the UK and connect that with Mark's Cost Plus Drugs and see how that could benefit the
Yeah, what are you
UK
guys
and
doing? What are
Europe
you
in
trying to
general?
do, Dean?
I'll do my best. Gosh, so it's a big topic. So I used to be on the what's called the Health and Social Care Select Committee, and I actually set up a thing called a all-party parliamentary group for digital health. So the stuff you're talking about, I'm loving. In terms of the NHS, I don't think. Sorry, Jordan, I don't wish to disagree because you're a good friend. I don't think there's plans to privatise the NHS. It has been done previously. A hospital was privatised under a previous government many years ago, but that was then bought back into public ownership. On the prescription side of things, the way it works is that people get subsidised, so you pay for for a prescription, but if you're on benefits or you've got a particular illness or whatever it might be, you can get them for free. But the point about transparency is important. So in the UK, we have things called pharmacies, same as you do in the US, and community pharmacies. Sometimes it's cheaper to buy the drug over the counter than it is to pay for it via the prescription. So aspirin, for example, is cheaper over the counter. I think the big thing in the UK, though, which is huge, is the need for reform. So the challenge you've got here is that the NHS has grown in so many ways over many years. And so I think the big opportunity is around digital. And it's the reason why I set up a thing called the Digital Health All-Party Parliamentary Group, because the challenge you've got is a lot of antiquated, very, very old systems that don't really talk to each other. So I remember during COVID, I used to volunteer down at my local hospital, and I'd go into one of the bits of volunteering was going in the maternity ward office. And I swear to God, there were folders this thick with maternity information in on paper about births, everything. I mean,
so you guys have no electronic health records, no like Epic EHR type stuff.
We do now, and it's gradually being integrated, and it's come a very, very long way in a relatively short period of time. But there are still systems that work like that. So the opportunity, I think, just generally for the NHS, is to look at how we use things like artificial intelligence.
Right. So you want to bring technology in to reduce your costs and improve your efficiency, things like telehealth and AI.
Absolutely. And that was one of my passion areas. I wrote a piece. There's a magazine in the UK called the Health Service Journal. And back in, I think it was 2009, 2010, I talked about the fact that we need to start to move to advising, not just on, I think the phrase I might have used around the time of the iPad coming out was we should be telling people not to swallow tablets, but to use tablets in terms of
I like that.
Starting to look at, how to do prevention, how to look after health better, how to go through that process. And I think the example I was giving recently, just generally, and I think this is one of the big things that came out of the US election around cutting red tape and all of these things, is I feel like that there needs to be generally in governments a sort of, I say an Ozempic of for government, which is to cut through red tape, get the sludge out of the system, reduce the cholesterol that's slowing down things. So I think there's a great opportunity for that.
Yeah, I mean, all governments have bloat, right? All governments, because over years things build up, and it's hard to cut them out because nobody wants to give up that money. I always ask the question, who's going to take less? And that's the people you have to work on, whether it's a pharmaceutical company, whether it's the community pharmacies. Because I was curious because I was reading up, you guys have the community pharmacies and the regular pharmacies, and then the NHS subsidizes it. And then you guys have tariffs, right? That where the delta in prices you guys will give to the pharmacies to push down. And then there's things you don't cover because like ED medications and other things, because that's where we were looking, because you've got this one, Mr. Fox or something like that, or something Fox that does prescriptions online, that sells medications online.
Yeah, so
Superdrug. Is it Superdrug?
It could be Superdrug. There are on the community pharmacy thing. So I did a lot of work with them actually, again during COVID, because often what happened was that they were the first places that were open. So you would have people working in community pharmacies giving advice and helping patients when they came in. And the big technology shift during that time was that a lot of GP surgeries, so the sort of the general practice surgeries, closed their doors and only went via the telephone. And that's continued in many ways. And my argument was, well, actually, can't we do more via iPads and through videos and those things?
Yeah, now that's a given here. We did the same thing, right? Well, we did tests with telehealth and telemedicine and allowing doctors to see patients via video online. And now that's that's normal now. It's almost used too much.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because in the UK we did it, and then it dropped off again. So there was the culture didn't stick in the UK, which I think is a real shame.
The big difference is now it's not used. It's used by some primary care doctors, but they get paid more when you come in the office. So I understand them doing that. But for prescriptions, because you need to get that prescription, that's where a lot of them do work. And I think that's where you see it in the UK too, right? So if you want to get so you get companies that'll do telehealth, so doctors who can offer prescriptions for ED medication, because it's a big business and a growing business. And
Yeah,
the same thing happens here.
absolutely. I think
Now,
the benefit. Oh, sorry, Joe. I was just going to say on
no,
the
go for it, go for
point
it,
about
go for it.
AI and technology, though, I think there's a huge
Mm.
opportunity. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
when the previous government, so I was a Conservative MP, and under the Conservative government, Jeremy Hunt, who was the former Chancellor, put, I think it was £3.4 billion forward at the start of the year to be used towards online and AI within the
That's cool.
NHS. And I think part of the challenge here is the system built so early, so we've had it for many, many decades now, that each part of the NHS works slightly differently. They talk to themselves, it's slightly different. The culture's different in each part.
Same here. Yeah, you guys started it was like 1948, because I was reading all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
That you guys started after the war and everything. So I can see we have the same challenges here, because AI, it's a given. It's going to help medicine. It already is. The hard part is who's AI and what's in it.
Yes.
That's
yeah.
it.
And one of the challenges, I think, on that, I wrote an article, about 2-3 years ago now, about the bias in AI as well. So if you've got, different communities, if the data that's been used is only from one particular community,
Right.
it's going to miss other issues. And I think there's going to be a huge swathe of work over the next, probably next decade, to look at how we do that. But also with robotics, one of the things I was very proud of in my work, I represented a place called Watford, and in my work there, Watford General Hospital pioneered virtual wards. And so I got the Prime Minister down to see it. I got the Secretary of State for Health to come down. And with that, what they were able to do during COVID was allow people to stay at home whilst using technology to monitor their symptoms and their vitals. And then over time, that then became something that pioneered. And I think they did talks around the world around that. But there's things like that then stop the bed walking.
That's just common sense now, right? It's
it is. Sense. It is, and obviously on the subject of politics, we can't have Dean, who's the esteemed politician in the place, without talking a little bit about politics. Mark, you recently supported Kamala Harris, and I'm not gonna lie, Kamala,
spit it out. Just say it.
I want to be. Are we talking about policies? I got to be politically correct.
No, you don't.
I'll be completely honest. I thought she was the wrong candidate, and I think where America is right now. I don't want those Americans who watch this and go crazy. I'm just giving my 2 cents. I just felt like she was not the smartest candidate for where America is right now. America is not at the point where you just need let's be like, you need someone who's strategic. You need someone who's like, look, this is what we need to do to get out of the mess we are in. This is the strategy. And you almost need someone who knows how to run businesses, right? Because the economy is a problem, and you don't need someone that's just going to churn just sound bites.
I'm not going to argue with you on that stuff. The question then became, is Donald Trump the right guy? Because that's really, neither one was a perfect candidate. And so, I've known Donald Trump for 25 years. I literally would hire Kamala Harris before I would hire Donald Trump. And because I think she's smarter, she's more pragmatic, she learns details, but she's a lousy salesperson. And that's part of it. You got to, Dean, right? Part of it is selling yourself. Absolutely. And making people understand why you're better for them than the other person is. And I don't think, she did a good job there. Now, to be fair, she only had 120 days after Biden dropped out. And so she went from, if you look at it just from a sports perspective, she went from being down 20 points when she took over to catching up. And, Donald Trump didn't even get 50% of the vote here. She lost by 1.5%. So, you can make arguments in all cases, but the reality is he won, and doesn't
Yeah.
matter why, he won. And
But
so now
I think double barrel Dean, what was your thoughts on the race on Kamala and Donald? What was your thoughts on that?
I do my best to not comment too much on American politics, but what I would say is
Fair enough.
I think it reflected this year around the world. Around I think 50% of the world's governments or countries went to the polls this year. I think it was 48% or something like that. And almost every country that was in power during the pandemic fell out of power, irrelevant of which political persuasion they were. I can speak about a little bit before I say about the US, the UK. I think we'd reached a point in the UK where I think, especially coming up to the election, we were trying to do the right things. We were talking about the fact we've got inflation down. We've got all of these things working. In my instance, I delivered all my pledges. I'd got my what's called tips bill through, which is to make sure workers get to keep 100% of their tips, which thankfully became.
There you go, you and Donald Trump, right?
Yeah. So I've got the hair potentially. But the reason why I say is that I think what happens is when politicians or when people feel that politicians aren't listening to them, they stop listening to the politicians. And the truth is, in the UK it happened, and in the US it happened, and there comes a point where people feel that someone's going to speak their language, where they're going to champion what they feel in their hearts, not just their heads, and when they feel that they're on their side, then they will vote for them. The difference, I think, between the UK and the US in the election was that I'm not going to get into political point scoring, but the party that's won that election won on an incredibly low poll, an incredibly low number of votes, and they didn't really promise much in what they seem to not be delivering on now. But I think in the US, there was a real push on quite tangible deliverables that I think spoke to the frustrations the American people had.
I mean, look, again, Donald Trump is a good salesperson, and he won, and that's all that matters. But I think social media also had a big part to play in how people perceive, because people, in my mind, people live their lives. They don't care about politics like we might, and they take the path of least resistance to learn. And whoever did the best job utilizing social media to scare people into thinking, that they were at risk, and to convince them that they were the only party who could fix that problem, social media really was the amplifier. Whether you're on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, there's an algorithm that's giving you more of what you already look at on a continuous basis. And that algorithm is individualized to you. And if I watch a lot of football, American or British football, I'm going to see Donald Trump interspersed in there. And I don't know the equivalent, Lafarge, what's the guy's name?
Farage.
Right guy?
Farage. Yeah. He's not
far
right.
Nigel Farage.
Yeah, Nigel Farage. I'm probably going to see, if I watch a lot of British football, I'm probably going to see Nigel Farage a whole lot more than I saw their opponent, right? Because just socially on social media, those algorithms, they align together. And so I think the Trump campaign did 1,000 times better than the Harris campaign in leveraging social media, because he went everywhere that could create a soundbite. And wherever there's a soundbite, it's going to show up on social media. And then that soundbite is going to turn into a meme. And that meme is going to show up in front of particularly young men in the US at this point, 8, 10, 20 times a day. Mm-hmm. And there's not a whole lot you can say to overcome that. And then on top of it, going back to what Jordan and I were talking about with crypto, right? I'm sure it's the same in the UK, particularly kids of color, young men of color. They're not in the traditional banking system. They didn't grow up saying, okay, I'm going to open up a bank account at my local bank. They were like Coinbase or, Robinhood or whatever else you guys have. It's easier for me to open up an account there and buy Bitcoin or Doge or Ethereum than it is to open up a bank account. And in the US, they were trying to shut that down. The head of the SEC was making life miserable. And so, I would say it all the time. Crypto could lose us this election. And honestly, I think that was the difference. Go ahead,
I think,
Dean.
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just think I was on the online, what's called the Online Safety Bill Committee in Parliament, which was looking at how do we make the internet safer, especially for kids. One of my proud moments was bringing in a thing called Zach's Law, which stops people purposely putting flashing images onto social media to trigger seizures. So I've seen the extreme harms that the internet could do. But exactly to your point, my argument has always been that the algorithms that are used, including to cause harm, but also in the ways that you mentioned, are optimized to make it so you're only hearing the voices you want to hear, and therefore everybody else is therefore against you. And I think one of the challenges that I've seen in Parliament in my own period between 2019 and earlier this year was that what you found is that rather than making arguments, politicians say the right thing. They say what you want them to, what they think their key audiences are going to hear. And I think there's going to be a real shift over the next few years. I think we're going to continue to see that. But I think we need to get back to the point that used to be where if somebody disagrees with you, you don't just cut them off. You make an argument to get them to agree with you.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I've moved from Twitter. I'm still on Twitter some to a new app called Blue Sky, where literally you can have a legitimate, in-depth conversation without people, threatening you or showing, crazy pictures or whatever it may be. Because I agree with you, Dean, we need to have those conversations in every country. We need to be able to have a discourse where if we disagree, let's discuss why we have a position. Maybe nobody changes their mind, but at least it's truly, a town square where people get to say their piece. And people respect the fact that you're both there engaging. And, so Blue Sky's helped. And to your point, where do politics go? Hopefully Blue Sky has an impact, but, where we are with the other platforms, you have to overwhelm the algorithms. That's just the way it goes. You can't expect to have a legitimate conversation and then have Twitter or Instagram or TikTok just show you something that has been fact checked. So whoever overwhelms the most, that's who gets the most visibility and does the most convincing.
I also think, though, that. Oh, sorry, Jordan.
And I just want to say to Elon's credit, I know sometimes there's loads of bad things, but to his credit, when he actually, because when I asked them why they bought Twitter, and he didn't buy it because he thought it was a good investment. He just bought it because they invited all of this owners of car companies to the White House, and they didn't invite him, and he felt like there was something going on. And when he saw online on Twitter, there was so much criticism about Tesla and everything else. And he decided to find out what was going on behind that. And he found out most of the social media websites and companies are all ran not just by algorithms, but there's also influenced by the government. The government, I mean, if they found collusion between that and
with Twitter, right? There's no question that our government was trying to influence Twitter when it came to COVID, right? Because they were trying to get more people to take the vaccines. But it wasn't the government running Twitter or Instagram or YouTube by a long shot, not even close. But, and I get Elon's a brilliant engineer. He's a brilliant businessman. The business side of Elon, I'll never take anything away. He's probably the best entrepreneur of this century, and maybe even more. But he's a troll. He is a world-class troll who loves to troll people, who loves to cause shit. And I think once he got Twitter and realized it wasn't so much about protecting Tesla. You don't spend $44 billion to do that, right? Or in his case, 20 of it was his, right? It's a power platform. Literally, every single premier, president, prime minister in every country that has Twitter has got to pay attention to Elon and listen to what he says. It is a really powerful platform. And so more power to him for doing that and having that access. But on the flip side, what he did to Twitter, he fucked it up, right? Because he wanted so badly for it to represent his views. Like he started by saying, we're going to publish our algorithm, the source code for our algorithm. And he did in early 2023. And he said he was going to do it again, never did. And even if with the publication, you can understand it, but you can't change it. He said that we shouldn't really talk politics. We're not going to take sides here. And then all of a sudden he started taking sides. And he, you know, I'm not going to pick a candidate. Then all of a sudden, not only was he picking a candidate, but because the way the algorithm works, based off of what was published, when you're the largest account, you have the most influence on the algorithm, because anybody who interacts with you, because you're the largest account, they're going to interact with you, you know, and the algorithm is going to show what Elon says to more people. Well, that's going to influence what people see. So whatever Elon likes and the people that Elon talks to, whatever they say and post, that's what the majority of people see. That's influencing outcomes. His right. He bought the company. He has every right to do that. But you can't sit there and say, you know, I'm doing this to protect the people, or this is free speech. It ain't free speech by a long shot. Elon's speech. It is Elon that gets to define it. If I say something and he doesn't want anybody to see it or hear it, he can diminish the reach.
I think there's another angle, though. I think over time, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how things do pan out over the next few years. But I think there'll be my gut feel is that in time, every generation starts to reject the former generation's approach.
Yeah,
don't they? And I think there'll increasingly be a need for authenticity. I think there'll be an increasing need for people to actually be able to get together and chat around things. I think what we're seeing now is that, a bit like the 60s in a way, but in a different ways, that, you know, activism has become the new rock and roll. You know, it's that where you used to go to gigs when I was younger, I remember going to see Radiohead and all sorts of brilliant bands when I was younger at university. Universities don't have that here in the UK as much now, you know, and I think what we're seeing is that people like to get together. They like to feel part of a tribe. They like to feel those things. And I think social media has given them that to a point. But what we'll start to see over time, I think, the threads of that.
I agree with you, right? Because people rebel against the way it's always been. Young kids don't want to do the way it's always been. They 100%. Want to take their own path.
And the young kids are in charge of what happens, because they're going to be the next generation. Now, I've got a social media network, telephoners.com. Mark, you had Cyberdust, I think. I don't know. Is that still going?
It's still there.
It's still there. Amazing. And then Blue Sky, is that one of your investments as well?
I'm getting ready to finish up the investment now. I'm trying to get them to let me put in some more money.
So tell us a little bit about what Cyberdust is about, and then obviously Blue Sky, so we can see some of the difference and the unique.
It's a digital version of a face-to-face communication. Everything deletes in 24 hours, and nothing's stored anywhere. So it's just like if we were talking face-to-face in the real world, there's no digital recording, there's no nothing. It all just is gone into the ether. So it allows me to use it for business, and it's pretty much, there's 100,000, 200,000 users. It's no big deal. But Blue Sky, on the other hand, it's been around for a few years. It's distributed social media, meaning that you own your own account and you could take your account to any Blue Sky compatible platform. But that's not really its big benefit. What is really great about Blue Sky is there's no for you algorithm. There is, you get to control your own experience, so that, when you go to Twitter, the first column is for you. And that's typically what people see. And whoever controls that really has a lot of influence. There's a Discover on Blue Sky, but it's not algorithmically driven like that. So on Blue Sky, when I start a thread, I have complete control of it. If I want to block somebody, the block really works. It doesn't, on Twitter, it's not a flow block. On Blue Sky, it is. If I want to have, if somebody makes, how you can do quotes on a post above the post. If I want to detach somebody because they're being rude, or, they're whatever, saying something out of pocket, I can detach that quote. I can hide replies from everybody, with the point being, I have complete control over my thread and my experience. If I don't want to see Elon, an Elon type person, great. I don't have to see them. If they don't want to see my post, they don't have to see my post. They can be in their own little world, and that's fine, because there's not an algorithm forcing people to you. Most importantly, because there's not that dominant algorithm, there's not one person controlling that algorithm. And as a result, when you go on there, I can talk about basketball, and out of like, I think there was like 300 replies and quotes on a basketball topic, and I had to hide 2 of them. I can talk politics, and it's the same thing. Now, right now, it leads towards more the left in the U.S., and there's more limited right because that's more on Twitter, but that's changing gradually, and I think it's going to change a lot, because it's not that someone from the right, or Mr. Farage couldn't come on and just say whatever he wants. It's just that he's not going to get as big an audience because an algorithm isn't going to push him to more people. So you have to grow your own following more on your own by engaging with more people. So that's why I like it a lot.
I think
I like that. And most of the things that you've said, actually, on a negative side, social media has caused a lot of mental health amongst a lot of people, because it's not natural to have this much information, number one, and number two, I was saying this a couple of years ago when I saw the artist Kanye lose it, and I knew Kanye when he first started in the younger days when he was innocent. We actually booked him for a gig in London, and it was just like one day when he was being criticized, I just asked a question, and I said, do you know how it feels like getting up in the morning and Googling yourself and you have millions of people calling you crazy, right? I wouldn't even know how to deal with one person calling me crazy. How would you deal with millions of people calling you crazy? You will become crazy.
Look at my Twitter feed. Look at the replies and the mentions, my Twitter mentions. It's insane. 90% of them are hateful.
So
mental health. Yeah. Not on the same level as you, Mark, not millions, but I would have, in politics, you have people.
Well, I want to ask the questions to you both, Dean. This is where I want to bring you in as well, because you did a lot with mental health. I want to get Mark to talk about it as well. How do you make sure?
I got about 15 more minutes, then I got to run.
Definitely. How do you make sure you keep your mental health on that level? And just briefly, Mark, and then
I don't take that shit seriously. I don't take that shit seriously. I mean, what matters to me is my family, the things I'm trying to accomplish, their health. I mean, there's always, and you learn this in sports too, right? When I first bought the Mavs and people were giving me shit, I took it personally. And then I realized it wasn't personal at all. And I'm sure it's the same way in politics. People want to win. People have their perspective. They want you to change your mind to what they believe, and they get mad if you don't, and that's fine. And sometimes I don't mind engaging a lot of times with people who vehemently disagree with me, because there's chances I'm going to learn from that. But as long, but when people are calling names and putting up pictures and other nonsense like that, you just have to learn to just discard it.
Yeah. So, Mark, because you've got a few minutes left, and Dean, we're going to continue later on as well. I'm going to get you on. If you want to say a quick goodbye to Mark, but stay on the line, Dean. Let me close
I'll
up
stay
with.
Here, lovely to meet you, Mark, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Same. I hope you win again.
He's definitely going to win again. He's definitely going to win again. Right. So Mark. 2025 it's the year. It is the year that everyone is looking forward to. 2024 has been a good year. How do you envisage investment in 2025? What's your plans for 2025 going ahead, especially with cost plus drugs and any other industries you want to invest in for 2025?
So one, healthcare in the United States, obviously, I think still requires a lot of change. We've taken some great steps to disrupting with cost plus. We'll do more in the healthcare side, not just the pharmacy side. Obviously, number two, AI is everything. The challenge is knowing what's real and what's not, because AI has reached a peak, not in performance, but in sourcing information. The challenge now for AI is, how do you train your models? Do you have to go out and hire a lot of people, hire Dean to train the model on how UK politics works or how the NHS works? Because as new things happen, content creators have gotten smarter. They're now saying, you can't have access to my content without paying me.
Yeah.
Rupert Murdoch is not going to give all of his content to ChatGPT for free. He's going to want to get paid. the leading
Sure.
hospitals in the US and the UK aren't going to just say, we're paying these doctors all this money, paying for all this research, take all of our research and just put it in and use it to train your models. It's just not going to happen. So investing in AI, you're going to have to be very careful and understand how models are being trained, how they can be scaled, and what the costs are. And so that's part two. Beyond that, I'm always just looking for things that are different. What's something that makes me think, why didn't I think of that? And what will it change? And because there's always some 12-year-old kid somewhere that's coming up with a new idea, and we just go, oh shit, that is really, really smart. And that's what I want to be in. So that's what I look for.
So, Mark, look, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. And look, when you're in London, come down. You can stay at my place and go and get a beer or something like that. Let's not stick on this internet business, mate. We have to go.
I'm a huge rugby fan. I'm a huge rugby union fan. I played forever.
We're gonna go watch some rugby. And Mark, you know the saying, we go and watch rugby and then start raking it in. You have to keep raking it in.
Don't worry, I'm good at that part. Rugby, I was okay, but yeah, I'm dying to go drink a few pints, watch a rugby match, go hang out. I'll come out and visit.
Love it. Mark, listen, have a good Christmas and Happy New Year to you. Take care. And we'll catch up soon, mate. We'll catch up soon.
You got it, mate. See you guys. Nice to meet you, Dane.
Take care, mate. Take care.
Cheers.
Fantastic, guys. That was Mark Cuban there. And Mark Cuban was joining us live from the US. And don't forget, is the Business of Life podcast. You can actually log on live right now to our after chat conversation with Dean. So I'm going to play the intro, the outro again, and we're going to go into
exposing the secrets to success in every episode with Business of Life. Hosted by the unstoppable Jordan Kensington, Business of Life is your weekly dose of inspiration and motivation. Every episode dives deep into the minds of entrepreneurs and iconic personalities from all walks of life, revealing the stories and strategies behind their success. Whether you're a seasoned business owner or just starting out, you'll find valuable insights and actionable advice to help you thrive. Tune in every week for powerful interviews, game-changing ideas, and the motivation you need to conquer your goals. Don't just dream big, live big. Subscribe now and get ready to transform your business and your life with Business of Life.
Yeah, amazing. Mark was absolutely fantastic. I hope you guys learned a lot from there. I'm just reading the comments. Dean is here too. Dean Russell is here too. Let's look at a few comments. Cabello says innovation is always accompanied by so many levels of insecurity. I agree with that. Let's see. Nick says, yep. Can you guys see the live chat? I'm sorry, Nick, we weren't looking at the live chat. I'm looking at live chat now, but we didn't see the live chat. Someone said very inspired. Cameron King talks about women. Great, fantastic. I'm here with Dean Russell, former MP Dean Russell. Dean, you were listening to our conversation with Mark earlier on. What's your take? Mark was absolutely fantastic. He talked about the crypto side of things, AI. There was a lot of conversation there. What was your take on that?
Brilliant conversation and great insights. I think, your points about luck and whether you create your own luck, I think were really important. I think one of the things I've learned over the years is that you can create your luck to a point, but actually it's spotting those opportunities to be lucky are really, really valuable. But I thought actually the common threads through this is actually the tech space and digital and somewhat I was a physicist, I think, originally, but I did a lot of work in the digital space. And I think that digital world is really going to shape the future, but not necessarily in a scary way, the Terminators and so on. But I think it's a bit like fire. I often say, especially with AI, a fire can keep you warm and cook your food, but it can burn your house down as well if you don't look after it and watch it carefully. And I think the key points I think I was taking out of it, there were many, but was about this point of, going into things with your eyes open, not if you fall over to get back up and then look back to see why you fell over and see if you can learn for the future. but also that sense of optimism. And I've often said, I think when we've spoken before on many occasions, that I feel that I'm a pessimistic optimist. I know things will go wrong, but I'm always hopeful and believe that they'll come right in the end if you keep trying. And I think that came through in your conversation.
No, definitely. And for people who don't know your history, tell us how you became an MP for Watford and some of the stuff you did in Parliament. I mean, we mentioned when I was speaking to Mark, we talked about mental health. You were a huge advocate of mental health, and you mentioned there briefly as well what you did with the tipping industry in the UK, which you mentioned at one of the award shows to a room full of B customers. So yeah, tell us how you got into becoming a member of Parliament and representing Watford, and some of the things you actually passed on to become law, and your work with the Prime Minister as well.
Well, thanks for asking me. The funny thing, actually, I have to say, Jordan, is that I'm actually back up at my parents' house right now. So I'm sat in the bedroom that I grew up in, hence it being
That's
blurry
amazing.
and my face being a bit blurry because I set the so
Bring
when
back
I'm
memories, thing. Bring back
so when I'm
memories.
talking, or do I allow it to set a fire in myself to say, actually, you know what, I'm going to prove you wrong? And so I went on to university to do physics. I won't give you my full life history, but worked in the digital space when it was quite young. I wanted to be creative, even though I was a scientist. And over time, I got interested not just in community, but also in charity and in trying to make a difference. And I know politicians all sound like they say the same thing. They want to make a difference. I can say in my case, I genuinely felt that. And so I ended up becoming what's called a district councillor in a place called St Albans. And that taught me this role of community, but also community leadership. And then over time, I was very fortunate to get involved with politics at different levels, and then got to be a member of parliament. But during that time, as you'll know, I've done everything from write children's books, a business book. I've done all sorts of crazy things. Painted portraits of prime ministers through to doing work on big digital projects. And I think that eclectic mix was what really was valuable for me in once I got to Parliament, because the role of being an MP actually it's a bit like working in an agency. Actually, you're constantly being with brand new challenges, brand new industries, brand new topics. And I think similar to Mark, obviously not been anywhere near as successful as Mark and yourself have been in the business world. But I think there's a sense that's needed around curiosity, but curiosity with focus and with enthusiasm. And what I found once I was in Parliament was that there are certain things that you can't change, not because, for any Machiavellian conspiracy reason. They're just really challenging, and they can take decades to make that change. Doesn't mean you should not try, but they will take time. But sometimes there are things that need to change, and you need to put all of your focus into it. And for me, one of those areas, as you mentioned, was the tipping bill. So I started to look at how we could make sure workers get to keep their tips. In the UK, for your international viewers, in the UK, the way it's worked always is there's been no rules or laws around tipping. So a business might say, add 10% onto a bill for tips, but there's no guarantee that money would go to the staff. And similarly, what sometimes happens, especially for some bigger businesses, is that they will take a percentage of the tip that's been given to the staff. I felt that was wrong. And what I noticed, going to your point around crypto and all those points earlier, actually was that because more and more people pay by credit card than with cash now, it's easier for that money to get lost in the system, and the businesses to really own the tip and decide what the staff get, where it should be the other way around. So I managed to go through many stages. I became the minister for the bill at one point. I worked with a colleague called Virginia Crosby to get it over the line, and that became law. But that, I think, fed into a wider piece, which was around mental health. So mental health for me was something that me and you have spoken out about many, many times. In fact, the first time we ever met was incredibly doing a basket brigade at this time of the year.
We're doing the charity. Yeah. I mean, that's actually an incredible story because I was in the office, and it's great to tell this story. And I think Dean, I think your agency wanted us to do something, a coverage on this charity. It was during this, so it was actually during this kind of time, Christmas time.
Yeah.
Going in front of people's houses and delivering parcels. Now, I was going to send a journalist down, but I just left the office that day. So I want to come and see what you guys are doing. So I came down, and when I came down, I actually said, I want to go door to door with you guys. I want to actually go door to door, gifting. And it was incredible to see the look on people's faces when they opened that door and saw a gift. And they were just, I remember one woman saying, I didn't have nothing for Christmas. I had no money for Christmas. This is just amazing. And when I look at that, that's why I was excited that you went into politics and you became an MP, because I just believe the government, the definition of government in Latin is to control, right? And most of what, and you said this when we were talking to Mark, and most of what government has done in the past has controlled people's mindset, controlled what people received, and also not delivered on promises. So, there's been a lack of trust from your regular day-to-day people when it came to the government. And I feel like when you became an MP, I thought there was hope. And what you did as an MP, because you bring empathy, and you bring a connection that's real, and there's a genuineness to you that it's not apparent. But obviously, it's like going to an all boys club, right? You can have all the best intentions in the world, and it's not conspirational. It's just you can have all the best intentions in the world. If everybody in a room doesn't want to change because they're happy just being part of this all boys club, it's difficult, and you push and you get there. But the bigger changes and the majority of changes that need to happen because the system is not spoiled. It needs to happen because the system has to completely have an overhaul. Do you agree?
So I think going back to the basket brigade, actually, because I remember it was the Greg Secker Foundation we did it with, and it was just the most incredible experience. But connecting those dots actually in a similar way, I was really, it was inspired going out with you on that day actually as well, because those moments, what it taught me in part, and I do one every year now in different forms. I did one just a week or two ago on a smaller scale. Was that sense that actually what people, when they came to the door, the bit that always still to this day gets me is that it wasn't so much that we were giving them a gift or giving them a box of things or basket. It was the fact that we were telling them that they weren't on their own. They were someone, because if I recall, we had to say something like, we couldn't say where it come from, but someone was thinking.
Say where it came from, yeah.
And I think that really deeply impacted me, and it did do, especially within Parliament, because I think if you go into politics because you want power, actually the reality is the challenge is so huge and so complex that you never really have ultimate power, even as we've seen with prime ministers over the years. Ultimately the party can bring them down, or the public, there's all that. I think that the challenge I see, though, is that there's a lot of argument about reform and we should change the system. But the problem is, what I often don't hear is what that actual solution is. And what I did in my role was that rather than saying, look, I want to go in and change the whole system, I thought, well, actually, how can I get what I believe to be the right result with the TIPS bill and Zach's law and with my mental health work and so on? by using and navigating the system in the right way. And I'm not the person who would stand up on the green benches in Parliament and shout and bully and argue, to belittle people to do it. I felt I wanted to be positively persistent and politely persistent, which meant that actually I would every single day I would see. So one of the examples was getting funding for the local hospital. I would, every time I saw a hospital minister, I would make sure I brought it up. When I went to number 10, I would bring it up. When I saw the Prime Minister, I would bring it up. And similarly with my initiative in my constituency of Watford, I had an initiative. I actually had a big idea during the election in 2019 that I wanted to train 1,000 people in mental health first aid awareness. And my argument was that if people knew how to ask the question of how are you, in a way that they knew how to respond to the answer, that would make a difference. And I think we've said before, said this before to you, that I have a phrase that HOPE is an acronym, HOPE, help one person every day. HOPE, help one person every day. And my take was that
my acronym for HOPE has always been help other people excel.
Oh, fantastic! We should combine the two. Hope.
Yeah, good.
But within that mindset, I think, how do you help someone every day? How do you help one person every day? And so I thought, well, actually, if people are taught how to use or be aware of the tools of mental health first aid, even if it's at a basic level, it will make a difference. And my plan for that was a 10-year plan. And we delivered it in 3 years, thanks to the local Chamber of Commerce who delivered it. But the reason why I say is that what I realised is that Parliament has several parts that are really important. One of those is a platform, and it's a platform for your voice. And if you use that voice positively and persistently and politely, and get people behind you and believe in your cause, and you make the argument why what you're saying is important, you create a really quite powerful movement and a following of people who will make a difference. Yeah. Now, the next stage of that is, well, sometimes that has to change the law, the legislation that might be needed, in which case, actually, the TIPS bill being an example of that, but Zach's law being another, where actually there was a navigating the system. Now, with the TIPS bill, I actually got that to a point where it was going to be implemented by the government, and it fell. It was supposed to be, I won't give you the whole story because you'll be here all night, but basically I'd managed to get the government to include it in a thing called the employment bill, which then didn't get introduced. And that's where luck comes in, because then by luck, I got what was called a private members bill ballot number, which meant I could then bring it in the next year. But my point, though, is I think reform, of course, of all these things is important. It's important to look at the systems. But I think sometimes it's used as an excuse for not getting things done. Whereas actually things have got done over centuries using very, very similar processes. And so sometimes it becomes the argument why stuff hasn't happened, whereas actually perhaps the system hasn't been used well enough. I'm not saying there shouldn't be reform of systems, but I think sometimes it can be an easy excuse for failure when actually you need to just keep working until you get it done.
No, definitely. I mean, one of the examples of the system not really working to the public's advantage was during COVID. And it later came out, I mean, Matt Hancock, that we'll be having here on the show in a few weeks' time, his texts were released. And, when you look at the conversation he was having privately and all the scandals that happened, it kind of intensifies the loss of trust for politicians. What did you go through? Because you were in Parliament during the period. You were in government during the period of COVID, and I was talking to you during that period. What did you see? Obviously, within reason, you can't obviously divulge too much to get you into trouble. But what did you see in government during that period, and compared to what's actually come out? What's come out. Of what the things that were happening, what's been released already. Do you think it was handled properly? And if you were in control, how would you do things differently?
I think there's so much to unpick there. I think at the heart of it, actually, the bit that's probably scary for some people, because there's lots of arguments around conspiracies and some, people in control and all these things. If I'm totally honest, what I saw was people, trying their best and sometimes failing. I saw real people, human beings, in various roles at different levels, whether they're ministerial or special advisors or so on, trying to work out what might happen tomorrow and trying to make the best judgment call to make the right decision. And sometimes they made the wrong decision, and I think that's all naturally coming out. But I just remember a palpable concern around not knowing what COVID would be next. And so I was on the Health and Social Care Select Committee. So every single week I would be asking a question to someone like Professor Whitty or Sir Patrick Vallance and Matt Hancock and others around what the thinking was behind certain decisions, but also what the decisions might be. And quite often what I saw were people just really trying to work out what the best thing was to do. Now, of course, it was such a big momentous thing and such an awful period to be in. There was a lot of anxiety, I think, across the board. There was lots of concerns. But even if you take the very basic nature of lockdown, for example, a lot of people were arguing, well, we went into lockdown too late. Of course, now a lot of people say we shouldn't have gone into lockdown at all. But at the time, I remember the period, the week or two before we went into lockdown, of there just being a lack of knowledge about what would happen. If we ask people to go into lockdown, will they do it? And what a lot of people, I think, forget is that the hours or so after Boris Johnson, the then Prime Minister, announced lockdown, was that places like Leicester Square were packed because people went out to party for their last time before lockdown came in. So I don't think there was any real knowledge of what the country would do. I think there was a hope the British people in the UK, of course it happened around the world in various places, but, there was a hope that they would follow those rules, but I don't think there was a certainty what would happen. And I think there was a sense of actually almost they got to a point where the British public was saying, please do something to stop this spreading, which meant that happened. But I think, my experience was that there were, of course, there will, like any place in the world, there will have been people who perhaps were using things for their own benefit. But my personal experience, including dealing with Matt Hancock on a very regular basis, was that it was a lot of people trying to do the right thing and sometimes failing, sometimes getting it right. And of course, now with hindsight, we can say, well, perhaps we should have done this differently. But we can do that with hindsight because it's now happened. At the time, we didn't know. I remember actually, I don't think this is any secret, being in a briefing with Matt, actually, where we were talking around the potential mutations of what would come next and the concerns around, how do we deal with that? There was probably about a few months into COVID, because it was what was called a novel virus. It hadn't really existed before in any way that we could work on. And similarly, when you look at the plans and all the planning had been around a flu epidemic, it hadn't been around a novel virus. So a lot of the preparation was very, very different from what actually ended up being the case. And as someone who I felt very, very strongly that if we were going to be asking nurses and doctors and porters and health professionals to be working in hospitals to look after our country, I felt that I should do my bit. So I used to volunteer every week at my local hospital, making teas and coffees on the wards, moving stuff from place to place and helping where I could. It was only a small thing. It was a few hours every week, but I felt that was really important so that I could see what the impact was of what we were doing in Parliament on the front line. And it was, I wasn't doing anything, the nurses and doctors were doing the real hard yards and the people working day and day. But it felt that actually I could then ask questions in Parliament and in the Health Select Committee and the Joint Committee on Human Rights that I was on as well, that hopefully were real questions that were coming from the front line rather than just theory or political shenanigans or political point scoring. I wanted to get to the heart of it. And I'm sure I look back and I'm sure there's things like if I pulled through, I'd go, I wished I'd asked a different question or done things differently. But there was a real sense of we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And when you're making decisions in that bubble, it's very hard to know that you're doing the right thing, but all you can do is hopefully do the right thing in your heart, and hopefully it'll work out right.
I mean, we'll get off this topic in a minute, but did you not think there was a little bit of fear mongering? Just briefly, did you think there was a lot of that happening in hindsight if you look back?
I think there was I think if you look back, you could argue that, and I can see why, but I think there was genuine fear as well. I really do. I think there was a genuine uncertainty around what could happen next. And I think, it'd be very easy to go back in hindsight and say, try and, tell a different story of how things were at the time. But I think, there was a genuine fear. I think a lot of people, myself included, were unsure what would happen next. And when you look at the Health Select Committee, I'd like to think if anyone went back and looked at the questions I asked, I think they were fair questions at the time. I remember one of them was around mental health, actually, on that point. So I remember a nurse, I think it was a nurse, but it's someone who was working in the hospital. And it was when there was a period where there was a concern around PPE and whether we had enough PPE. And my memory was that I would phone the hospital, my local hospital, almost daily and say, look, if you've got enough, is there anything more I can do? And they'd always reassure me, look, it's getting tight, but yeah, we're okay. And I remember speaking to this whilst I was volunteering, and I don't think they knew I was an MP actually at the time. I wasn't hiding it, but it wasn't necessary to bring it up. But we're having this conversation, and they said that there were for their family who were at home, because they said that they were coming to work. They knew they had enough PPE, but their families were watching TV, to your point about fear-mongering. And on the TV, it was saying that everyone going into work in hospitals was at risk. There wasn't any PPE, and their families were suffering in their mental health because they were worried about their family member working in the hospital, which in turn stressed them out and made them feel bad. So my question at the time to the head of mental health for the NHS, who happened to be on our committee that week, was, are we doing enough to support mental health for staff, but also for family members? And actually, a few months later, they announced, actually to me, that on the select committee, that they were going to put a £5 million, I think it was £5 million, fund for mental health for staff, and also agreed that they'd be doing some information for family members. So I think, it's a challenge. I mean, I am the only person, which may come back to bite me, I don't know, at some point, but I think I'm the only person who ever asked Dominic Cumming why he didn't apologise for going to Bernard Castle during a mammoth session with him. And in a way, not because I wanted to do a gotcha or do anything, to get headlines, but because I wanted to understand his side, why he didn't, when he was in the Rose Garden in number 10, why he didn't apologise, because that would have been the easier way to, diffuse some of the anger, but it made it worse that he didn't. And so, but I remember another time I asked Professor Whitty, I think it was quite a while into the pandemic, I asked him, have we put, it was a series of almost devil's advocate questions, have we put COVID over other serious health conditions, for example, COVID over cancer? And the backlash I had online, I think it was something like 3 million views of that video, of me asking the question, with an absolute split between half the people arguing that I was an anti-vaxxer and what stupid question, and another half saying thank you for asking the question because we feel that the balance wasn't right. So I think there's lots and lots of things that we can look back on. I think the key thing we need to do is learn from it, and I think that's where I'd like to think the COVID inquiry will help with that. I don't know how much it will, but I think we need to continue to ask questions and look forward in terms of how we learn from these things, so that if it ever happened again, we'd make better decisions. And I think I've lost you, Jordan. So while I'm waiting for you, Jordan, to come back, do you want me to add a little bit about the mental health work? I'm conscious I've talked a lot around COVID, but I think on the mental health side of things, while we're waiting for you to reconnect, On the mental health side of things, I felt that, before I started in Parliament, it was something I'd done a lot of work on. For my maiden speech in Parliament, I talked around the fact that I felt that loneliness and mental well-being are two things that we really need to tackle within society. And what that then led to was the work around training 1,000 people in mental health first aid awareness, but then also trying to change the law around mental health well-being within the workplace. And what that ended up meaning was that we had over 3-4 years, I tried twice to change the law through what's called a 10-minute rule bill, to try and change it so that every workplace had a mental health first aider, but also then helping change the health and safety executive guidelines, which meant that effectively the purpose of that was to make it so that there's parity between physical and mental health. And my argument at the time, which helped change the rules around the suicide prevention strategy that the government brought in, was my line was that if suicide were a virus, surely we'd be on the hunt for a vaccine, and if loneliness were a disease, surely we'd try and find a cure. And I think what I've seen over the past few years, including from great work from yourself as well, Jordan, is this sort of shift where I think people are taking mental health more seriously, and the parity between physical and mental health is certainly getting closer, but there's still an awfully long way to go on that. So I'm just going to wait for Jordan to come back. I feel like this is turning into my show. So just while you're returning, Jordan, I'll hold the fort for a few minutes if that's useful. So for anyone watching still, this is still Business of Life podcast with Jordan Kensington. As you will know, I'm not Jordan, but I'm a guest. I think there's been a technical issue on Jordan's side. So just in terms of the discussion so far, obviously we've been talking about a whole range of issues and topics, from government to COVID to mental health. But I know on the topic of business, I think one of the conversations Jordan and I were having earlier and previously was around the use of artificial intelligence. And if Jordan was going to ask me, which I think he may have done, around AI, I think one of the things that it's worth looking into around AI is around the risk around AI scams. And around a year ago, actually, I think it was January last year, if you want to check out a thing called Hansard, which is the British Parliament's sort of minutes of everything that's ever said in Parliament. I gave a speech on AI and the risk of AI scams. And I think one of the things I was very conscious of was the use of AI during elections. And thankfully that hasn't quite been the case this year. It hasn't been caused as much interference as one might fear could happen. But I think over the next year, one of the things that's going to happen is a growth of AI scams. Jordan, I've hopefully held the fort for you while you went offline for a little while.
Dean, I knew you would take control. We had a little bit of technical, but I knew I have all trust. I had all trust that I'm holding. You know when you fly in a plane and you know the person that's next to your co-pilot, you've got all the confidence. I had no doubt that you would take that plane to where it is. Now, thank you very much. So, Dean, what I was actually going to ask you before we got cut off was, would you ever consider yourself, becoming a prime minister yourself, going for it for the top job?
You know what I would say is that, of course, I think any politician would love to do it. but I have seen, I've been very close to watching what it does to prime ministers as well. I would say the best leaders are the ones who are asked to be there. And so, of course, I wouldn't deny that, of course, you know, like anyone, I think it always sounds a bit disingenuous when politicians say no. Of course, I would, but I would want to do it on the premise that people wanted me there rather than because I wanted to have the power of it. And I think any leader who hungers just for the power is probably a dangerous leader. I think one who is there because others see something in them. So I'd love to think that others may see that in me, but I'm not so egotistical to assume that they do. So I think even having been a backbench MP and the difference I could see being made there, and also briefly as a minister, you know, you can make a lot of difference without being prime minister. But of course, I'd be a fool to say no. But I don't anticipate it happening.
Well, put it this way. Looking at your tenure as an MP, I think there'll be thousands of people that will, and millions of people that will support you becoming a prime minister. Now, as we grow close to the new year, we're seeing a lot of changes in the world. Faith is very important. Spirituality is very important to a lot of people. Would you consider are you someone that believes in God, or you don't, or what's your stance on that?
Oh, no, very much so. You know, my faith, and I know it is to you as well, my faith is very important.
Yes.
I think in part it gives you a different view of the world as well. You know, if you know there's something much, much, much bigger than you, and you realize that you're not in a diminishing way, but you're a small part of something much bigger. I think that helps. I feel that helps stop me having an ego or getting too big-headed or feel too much for myself. But it does also fill me with a sense of purpose. And I think what I saw, and I think going to your point around the period of the pandemic, was the sense of hopelessness that people can feel. I mean, one of the things I didn't mention during my time in as an MP was that I helped get funding. So we got to a point in Watford, the place I represented, we got to a point where we had 0 rough sleepers on the streets at night. I mean, it's one of the most proudest things that I'll probably ever do in my life, that we had a period where not one person was sleeping on our streets of an evening for
amazing.
Quite a considerable period of time. And the reason why I say that is that I think when you've got a purpose, or you feel you've been put here for a purpose, it makes it easier to then withstand the trolling and the barriers that are put in your way. And so for me, my faith isn't overt. You know, I don't get to go to church very regularly, but I have an inner peace and an inner faith that makes me feel like I'm here for a reason. If I'm here for a reason,
I feel the same. I feel the same way. I don't go to church very often, but I really believe that it's so important to connect to God spiritually on your, in the quietness of your domain. You set a quiet place, and I think for years that has kind of made me who I am today. I actually wrote a book recently, which is out now on Amazon, called "Why Do We Sin?" And why I wrote that book was because I always like to go behind the reason, right? Sin is such a big thing, but nobody asks the right question. I was speaking to Elon Musk's dad the other day, and I asked a question: what happens when you sleep? And he was like, do you know what? I agree with you. Nobody talks about this at school. Like, no one teaches you what happens when you sleep. They just call it a dream. So I had to investigate, why do we sin? Why are we wired to sin? And it's literally it's a formidable read, because I literally go into the origins of sin and why we consistently sin. So there's a question I ask everybody: why do you think we as a human race sin? And nobody it can say they're sinless. Why do you think we sin? And in your opinion, what can you do to curtail sinful behavior?
Gosh, that's a powerful question. And if I may just throw back at you before I give the answer, I mean, the reason why I feel an affinity with us is that there's so many strings to the bow, but all of it's trying to find purpose. Whether I've written a science fiction novel that I'm still looking for an agent for, by the way, if anyone's out there. But one of the themes of that is this sort of connection of how does the character connect to this wider world, and what's the concept of free will and all those things, and there's some big sort of topics. But the reason why I think we sin, I think sometimes, I think it's often, and I'm trying to think out loud whilst I'm giving an answer to such a big question, and try and be as concise as I can. I think when we're not in congruence with ourselves, and when we're not in integrity with ourselves, and not integrity is in do we steal or not steal or whatever, I think there's a sense of peace that comes within ourselves when we know who we are. And if we know ourselves in a way that makes us realize that actually things will come right, and that if we do the right thing, that actually it will help open up new doors for us. I think that's important. And sometimes I think the sinning, if I'm reading your question correctly, can sometimes be through impatience, through wanting to get something quicker than we want, than we think it's going to come, trying to cheat the system, as it were. And I think when you have faith in why we are who we are, and we have a belief system that enables us to know that good things will come if we wait, but also if we work towards them, then we don't want to cheat the system. And so if you think of sinning, if I'm thinking about it in the right way, as I give this sort of verbal thinking out loud, I think if you think of cheating, sometimes it's stealing. Well, why do we steal? It's because we don't think that we'll be able to ever get to the point of having the ability to buy it. Why do those commit adultery, for example? It's because they perhaps don't feel that they would get that love from another way. I mean, there's many sins and many ways of describing them. So I think part of it is that sense of not having that self-belief, that self peace, but also that sense of potentially trying to cheat the system to get to a point that because we don't feel we'll get there ourselves, and that's sad, really, because that's a lack of self-belief that causes us to do that. But what was yours? I mean, I'm sure your book explains in far.
No, I completely agree with you. In a way, I believe that our belief in the ego, which is our body side of our human experience, has tarnished our spiritual side, which is the realist side of our existence. And I believe that I'm not religious in terms of having to be seriously religious, but just on a spiritual level with a connection to God. I feel like Jesus was here to forgive us for our sins and make sure we know how to repent and go through him, but most importantly, to remind us that we are a spiritual force having a human experience. We essentially soul. And I mean, scientifically, it's been proven that man exists mind, body, and soul. You have your mind, you have your body, and your soul. But what's happened is, because of what we've been programmed, I mean, we've been taught, I mean, in college, I learned human biology and biology. I learned physics, chemistry. I learned everything to do with the material, right? How to make things happen, how do I feel happy? When you say you're happy, most people will say, I'm happy because I've got this, or I'm happy because this has happened. Nobody goes internally. And once you go internally, you have to confront the soul. And when you confront the soul, you have to feed the soul, and the soul needs food. That's why it's called soul food. So what do you do to feed your soul? And that has nothing to do with material things. You can have all the things in the world, all the cars, the houses, and everything else. It would not feed your soul. Your soul is yearning, to be spiritually fed. And I feel why we sin is because we have no knowledge of the soul. You're literally intentionally not taught about your soul. And it never used to be like that. So when I was doing history in this book, I found out if you go back to pre-Dark Ages. If you go back to the history of places like Kemet, Kush, and why people went to Kush, which was called Egypt or Kemet, to learn about to learn. I mean, spiritual school before the people like Socrates in Greece took that knowledge. It was about studying your spirit, the spiritual side, which people stopped studying and then started studying the body. Because if you live in the spirit, you have no fear, and you can't be hurt, because your soul can never be hurt. Nobody can sit here and affect your spirit, but someone can sit here and affect your mind. If I program your mind, you will say, my mind's playing tricks on me. The reason your mind is playing tricks on you is because you've been programmed. From the day you watch a cartoon to the films you watch. If you watch a lot of violent films, you programming your mind to become more violent. If you watch 2 hours of comedy, you're going to find yourself laughing. And they say laughter is the best medicine. You're programming your mind. Now, on your physical nature, if you eat a lot, it's gluttony. If you drink a lot, you're going to get drunk. But the soul is something different. When you start learning about the soul, you start learning how to disconnect from the worship of the body and mind. And I think that disconnects you from sin. I think that's where we need to reach a point where you remember you're a spiritual being having a physical existence. I think that's why we sin, because we pay too much attention to the body. And I can mirror that with the celebrating your birthday, which if you look, I had to look into, because I had to look into the Bible and say where was the birthday celebrated, and you don't see anything like that. And if you look into the history of it, it's basically a ritual, and the ritual makes you go older, because the more you confirm that you're old, the more you tell all your cells in your body to act old. It's a mindset, right? And you see someone who's 90 years of age behaving like someone who's 20 years of age, and you say, what's the secret? Then they'll say, I feel young. And you keep telling yourself you feel young, you're going to feel young, because you command your cells in your whole body to act as you want it to act. So when you look into that history, you just find out why isn't it taught at school? So that's why I think I think we are enslaved to our body.
It's fascinating and very eloquently put, far better than my diatribe. But I think the core part there, actually, that you touch upon, which I agree with, is that I think what we've seen, going back to the conversation you were having with Mark Cuban and talking earlier as well about social media, is that what we've started to see is people detaching themselves almost from all three, but more so in their minds, which is where somebody could be a horrible troll online, yet if you met them in person, which some I have, they are a totally different person. And it's that separation, I guess, of soul and body and mind. And I mean, I had a situation, in all fairness, it was a gentleman who'd had quite serious mental health issues, but had ultimately contacted me with a quite serious threat, and the police had to be involved. But I remember a while later calling them, to knowing that they'd been going through challenges, and calling them and saying, look, please don't do this again, because it's horrible for my staff and for me. But I said, I forgive you. And I made the point to say that I forgive you, but please, as part of that forgiveness, please get help. And I know that they did, and really got themselves into a much better place. And I think you can only do that. Well, I like to think you can only do that if you're comfortable within yourself, and I guess within knowing who you are, and from a place of feeding your soul, I guess. And I often find, I know Mark earlier was talking about the ability to block people on Blue Sky or Twitter and all those things. I must admit, as an MP, I very rarely blocked. I mean, if I blocked someone, it was usually because it was they were trying to promote links to other websites or whatever. But very rarely did I block people. And I'm sure anyone who watches this video in the future will probably go back and check whether I did. But rarely did I block them. And partly I was like, well, actually, I'm in a position, a community position where people will say things about me, and they will come at me and they'll say things. But in me, unless it was damaging my reputation in a false way, of course, that's always a risk. But within me, I knew that they didn't know me. You know, they didn't know my soul. They knew your point, but they didn't know me. So therefore, I was interchangeable. If I'd been a different person as that MP, I would have had the same diatribe against me. If I'd been even a different political persuasion, I would have still had the same attacks, but just from different people for different reasons. And I think when you're certain in yourself in that way, it's easier to accept that things will happen. In fact, I used to joke actually that being an MP at times, especially when things are changing and policies, is a bit like being a lead singer in a band. You're constantly being given the lyrics as you're singing them, and the audience, 1/3 of them don't want you to be there because they're here for another band, so they don't want to listen to you. 1/3 of the audience have no idea who you are, and therefore it's your opportunity to win them over. And 1/3 of the audience will love you no matter what you say and do. And I think when you look at it like that, then actually the fact that the group over there really dislike you, they're going to dislike you anyway. As long as you're sure in yourself, then you can accept that. But I think in politics, there's far more thin-skinned activity going on, which then leads to this Punch and Judy politics of people constantly throwing names at each other, which I think is probably unhealthy on every level one thinks about it.
Definitely. Mark, I was going to ask Mark this question, but it totally run past my mind. But I asked Elon's dad legacy. And I said, I led the question by saying Mike Tyson was asked by a young girl before his latest boxing match what he'd like his legacy to be. And his answer to that was legacy. I don't really care about legacy. And when I listened to that, Errol gave a different response to it because he thought legacy was very important and it was important to look at legacy. I'm in the balance because I really feel like, we live a life where we're so concerned about what people think about us, and we spend a whole life building this legacy for some one day a newspaper saying something and ruining the whole legacy or doing whatever it is, and then you go into depression because you feel like your whole legacy has been blown away. But if you don't care, if you really don't care, if you have this essential thought, because now having kids, I look at my child and look at my children and I say, look how innocent they are. They come to the world with no legacy. They just come to the world just happy to be born. They're just happy for the sake of being. Nothing adds to their happiness than just being with their parents. That's why they're happy. And then you get taught this thing in the middle that you need to have this legacy and that you need to protect. And then you spend your whole life protecting this thing that when you're ready to go, is it all worth it? Or is it better just to live your life each day, just doing your best to do good and, not caring about what the outcome is? As long as you're happy, as long as you can go back to sleep and you're happy with what you've contributed to the world, without having, the world to say, hey, you were the greatest. Jordan Kensington was a great, Dean Russell, the most amazing person in the world. I guess I want to say, does legacy matter to you?
So it's a difficult, to your point, actually, probably in the same place. I think it depends what you perceive to be legacy. So I think I look at, say, Tony Blair, for example. I think he from what I've read, I might be wrong on this, but from what I've read, during his first term as a prime minister, he became he wanted to have a place in history. He wanted to have a legacy, and that I think that led him to make decisions that perhaps in hindsight and if we look back, probably damaged his place in history rather than added to it. I think there's an element for me that. But I'll give another example where actually something I was very proud of. So a week or two ago, I went to the third session of there's a local lady in Watford called Eva, who, after doing my mental health first aid awareness course, one of the 1,000, decided that she wanted to do more. And so she set up this brilliant cooking program, mental health cooking program, where she gets people together, they learn to cook. There's a bit of a competitive element to it, but the opportunity is to use cooking as an opportunity to talk and get people to think about mental health in a way that's more conversational. That, in a way, is a legacy of sorts. It's inspired somebody else. So I think it's not so much, I think, that I would like to leave a legacy. Of course, we'd all like to be remembered for a long time, but I think it'd be even greater to feel like I've inspired other people to do something that they want to do. And I've always felt that, I think Mark mentioned this earlier when he was talking about, I forget the example of the person, but someone who was streaming and said that if they'd done that 20 years ago, they wouldn't have made as much money because it wasn't such a big thing.
It was Kai Cenat.
Yeah. So, and I often think the same, in reality, I think over time, and I think this is where AI will be amazing in decades to come, in helping people identify what they're best at, what the best version of them are. And so I often in talks say, if you take David Beckham, if someone hadn't taught him football or sport, he'd maybe a really unhappy estate agent somewhere. If someone hadn't taught Beyonce to sing and got her down that path, or perhaps she'd be a really miserable middle manager somewhere because she hadn't found what she was here for. And I think there's an element where if I can, through my fact that I was I'm sat in my old bedroom here, my dad was a lorry driver, I'm a working class kid who managed to get to Parliament and have done portraits of prime ministers and can call them by their first name. If I can help inspire other people to go, actually, you know what, the barriers that I'm facing are actually in my mind rather than the reality.
True.
And find the thing that they love doing, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're famous. It doesn't necessarily mean they're a celebrity or go into politics, but something that in their soul, to your previous point, they are the best version of themselves. If I can inspire a few people to do that, that would be a legacy. But it's one that probably won't be written in books. It probably won't be something where someone will be a statue of me. But if I in my final minutes know that I've made that difference for just a few people, then that is that sort of passing it on in a way that is a legacy that may mean I'm remembered by the people that matter and the people who I've made a difference to. But I think it's different from necessarily being written about in history books or statues or whatever. But who knows? I've still got a while to go. I may change my mind on that as I get older.
When you become prime minister, eh? When you become prime minister, I'm calling it out now. I always call out things that they happen. I remember when we talked about being an MP. We were in Greg's house, and we said, Dean will make a good MP, right? We all agreed he will make a really good. And then it happened. It was like 2 years after it happened. So these things will happen when you're prime minister. I'm going to remind you of this conversation. Kemi is the leader of the party now. And what do you think of Kemi? Do you know her personally? What do you think of her? And do you think she stands a chance to lead the country well?
Yeah, I do actually. I do know Kemi well. In fact, for on and off for a very brief time, I was I did some what's called a parliamentary private secretary, which means that you help ministers or secretary of state or whatever in Parliament with some of the debates, and so I'd worked not for a long period of time, but I sort of worked with Kemi on some of that, and so I do know her well as I could do, and I think she's got all of the skills and the talent to do it. I think she's a natural communicator in the sense that she will say things the way she sees them, and I think politics is calling out for that. Actually, this sense of saying what people really think and not feeling like they've got to go through a focus group before speaking. And I think you'll get that with Kemi. I also think what we're seeing now with her approach is from a sort of ideological position to then form policies rather than just saying, look, these are our policies, do you like them or not? And then changing them so that people like them. And I think going back to my point I think when Mark was on the interview as well, this idea that we make arguments to get people to agree or disagree, rather than putting out a bunch of stuff and hope that they like it, and if they don't, then they're wrong. You know, for me, there's a skill that I think Kemi brings, but I think she'll get even better at it over time, is this ability to make an argument for people to react to, but then to think about, and then perhaps go, actually, she has got a point, and then build on that. I think the other thing with Kemi, from my experience with her, is that she, I think she's actually quite an inspiring character, but she doesn't use that in a way that, so what I mean by that is that she doesn't rely on the fact that she's the first female black leader of the Conservative Party. That is not even secondary. It's so far down the list of reasons why she's in that position. And I think that's really powerful, because it's not about identity politics or, you know, all of the stuff that I think people may use in different parts of politics. I think for her, it's about her ideas, it's about her policies, it's about meritocracy, it's about conservative values. And I think that's really important, because for me, that means that anybody in the UK or around the world can look at her as an individual and say, she's inspiring me to get somewhere, and not just because they're from a certain background. And I think that's going to prove, I think, to be really powerful.
No, that is really powerful. One of my favorite books is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I think that book transformed a lot of what I think of life. What would you say is your top 3 books that you would say transformed your view of life?
Oh my gosh, I love that book, actually. That's one of them. You know what? I can never remember the names of books. I can. There's so many over the years that I've sort of read and loved. The Alchemist is one. Life of Pi I loved.
Yeah, Alchemist, amazing book. Yeah.
Both because they tell these amazing stories, but speak to you at a deeper level. There's some great books as well, things like Tools of Titans, which I think is just a really great handbook to look at what skills people have had. I think this will sound like a crazy one, but I always remember as a kid loving Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and you know the kids book. And I think actually when it comes to those sorts of books, I know I should give some very clever, smart, long title, probably last title books, but for me, actually, there's a simplicity in storytelling that that children's books really do provide. And having written 4 children's books myself, actually more, but 4 that are published on Amazon and all of that, I think there's a certain skill in simplistic storytelling, which is a skill that's needed in politics, it's needed in the boardroom, it's needed in the classroom, that actually is often overlooked on the basis that it's for kids, or it's it's not necessarily these big thoughtful ideas. But actually, I think books like that really do speak to something different. From my experience from writing children's books, there's nothing more powerful than when a kid connects to your story. So when I wrote one of my books, is called Mouse and the Moon Made of Cheese, which I think I still need to send you some of my books, Jordan. So I'll have to.
I'll send you my recent one.
But the reason why I say is that I used to talk about this, because I've written another book called How to Win the Ultimate Professional Pitch Guide, but they're actually companion books without meaning to be, because my argument always used to be, when pitching or presenting or speaking, especially when you're speaking to, say, a chief executive or a CEO or a politician, they're very similar to children. They're very similar in the sense that they get bored very quickly. They want to be the hero of their own story, and they also want to be, a saccharine effect of visuals. And when you look at children's really good children's books, they do that. They make the reader the hero of the story, or at least they empathize with the character in a way that it's very hard to do in other ways. But also there's a visual which I think Life of Pi and The Alchemist do. There's a visual nature to it that creates memories in your brain that you connect to
True.
and connects in ways that are deeper. And I think when you think about the way that you pitch or any of those things, it's exactly the same thing. You want to try and get across your story in a memorable way, make the client or the person you're selling to or the person you're trying to convince the hero of the piece, or at least make them aware of how they fit into the story and how you'll make a difference. But also it's often very visual. And that's why for me, I've always found it really important to try and, I've not done it much in this interview, but try and sort of create narratives that tell a visual story and get people to feel it, because the power of feeling is so much more powerful than words or body language or anything else. If you can get someone to feel something, and I think in politics that's important. I also think that's important in life. And I think those sorts of books allow you to do that. I'm sure I'd give you 3 different books if you asked me in 10 minutes time, but those are the 3.
That's good. It's the Business of Life podcast, so it is connected to life. So 2025 is round the corner. We have a few days to 2025. What do you feel going to 2025, and what would you like to see happening in the world? 2024 has been quite, funny time, good and bad. The good side of things, we ended up having a daughter, which is amazing. That's on a personal level.
Congratulations.
After my wife. Okay, thank you very much. But the world also has changed a lot. There's the war that's happening in Palestine and Israel. There is, things on the home turf with, people being strangled economically, can't afford, things and things like that. But on a positive note, and then obviously in America, in the news, there's been, drones in the sky. No one knows what's going on with that. It's a little bit, everyone has their opinions about what's going on. But I always feel like the same way they say you are what you eat, you are what you think, and you are what you allow into your mind. And I had that approach during COVID, and that approach was, by the grace of God, I stayed. I mean, we spoke during COVID as well. I was in Mauritius, during the whole 2 years of COVID, which was by God's grace, I was there. But I stayed away from the news, right? And it helped my mental ability to deal with COVID, because I just didn't know what was going on. So I think one way of getting into 2025 is by projecting positivity. So what is your vision for what you want 2025 to be? If in a perfect world, how would you want to see 2025 to be? Not just for you, obviously for you as well, but for the world in general, because we are all citizens of the world and we want to see the world be a better place. So what are the few things that you would like to see change in the world for the better?
Oh wow, what a big question again. I think I'd like to see several things. One is a sense of stability. I think this past year has been the sort of the last stages of what happened to the world over the period of the pandemic. Obviously, we've had the cost of living crisis through the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. We've had the more elections around the world this year than, I don't know whether it's ever, but there's, I think 50% or something like that, world elections. There's been a lot of instability, but there's also, I think there's been a lot of anxiety over the unknowns over the years. So I think a sense of stability is going to be really important. Whether people like the politicians that are in power at the moment is a different conversation, but they're there now. We've had the US and UK elections, means whether we like it or not. And of course, in my instance, I'm not too happy with the UK, the Labour Party being in power, but they are there. They've been voted in. That's democracy in action. And so my hope is that in of itself will bring a certain level of certainty and consistency, because for the past year or two, everyone's been talking about the upcoming election in the UK, and of course the same in the US. So I hope that stability comes through. I do have a sense of optimism that, we've I think the world's gone is suffering from a little bit, and I don't mean this in a light way. Actually, a sort of certain sense of PTSD. You know, we've been hit as a world in so many ways that affected our lives in such a dramatic way. If you then layer onto that the impact of social media, and you know, it's entered into people's lives in ways that I don't think we ever could have foreseen a decade ago, which I think is also up the ante in terms of the way people feel about things. So I'm hopeful that over the next year, that sense of stability, that sense of certainty, that whether we like it or not, that's what's happening, will come through into a sense of actually people feeling back in control of their lives. They may dislike the governments in some cases. They might dislike presidents or not, or love them or whichever, but there's at least a certainty there, which then I think means that people can start to go, how do we plan forward? How do we take control of our lives again? How do we not just rely on government change to impact our lives? And I also do feel quite optimistic that for all the fear mongering, which I've done myself as well around things like artificial intelligence and so on, I think I'm hopeful over the next year and probably over the next decade that AI will be something that people will start to use as a tool to improve their quality of life, but also we'll start to see solutions to the energy challenges, you know, whether it be looking ahead to use of nuclear. I read something this morning, I might be incorrect, but I read something this morning about some massive hydrogen site which could be used for energy for thousands of years has been discovered. I don't know. Wow. You might have to fact check me on that, whether that's whether it was an anomalous article. So I think there's that. I think the other bit for me that's interesting with this, and I know this will sound very crazy, I love my science fiction and I love my comic books and all those things. And this year you've got both Superman and Fantastic Four coming out. And the reason why I mentioned those,
I love that. I never thought that was going to come at you, man. Superman and Fantastic Four.
Yeah. So the reason why I mention it is that, you know, Superman traditionally has always been a figure of hope, and you know, in culture generally, irrelevant of whether you like those movies or not, or those comic books. But the past iteration, you know, of Superman, you know, people complained that it was quite dark and quite negative, and you know, I quite like those movies. But I do think actually, just in of itself, looking at the year ahead, I think people will hopefully start to have that sense of hope around the world. I think the media and the movies and pop culture and all of those things will all have a play into that, and so we'll start to look at the world through a different lens. You know, there's lots of things I could complain about and say might not be great, but I like to think that stability will bring a sense of, you know, control and a sense of self-worth and hopefully a sense of hope.
I like that. I like that. Dean, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. And for all those who were watching earlier, The Business of Life, we had Mark Cuban on the show, and Dean joined us at just the right moment because we were talking about, you know, health and politics, and it's been an amazing show. I think this is the last one I'm doing before the end of the year, so it's amazing to have you guys on board. Wishing you a happy new year, happy holidays, and and happy good memories back in your room. Yeah.
Happy New Year. Thank you, Jordan.
No worries, Dean. Take care, mate. Take care. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It's been an amazing show. Thank you for watching, wherever you've been watching from. And I hope to see you guys soon. I think this is the last show we have for the year. I'll speak to the producers. If not, I'll see you guys in the new year. For myself, it's a goodbye. Goodbye, Dean. Take care, guys. And I'll see you guys in the
Exposing the secrets to success in every episode with Business of Life. Hosted by the unstoppable Jordan Kensington, Business of Life is your weekly dose of